The Rise of America 1620. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction. So please don't attempt real magic, the results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 26, History Diverted. Following the source of the voice, Zhao Hongyu spotted the little girl, Emma. His gaze inevitably fell on Emma's expression and the nugget of gold in her hand. Zhao Hongyu narrowed his eyes slightly, then turned to cast a long glance at the retreating baker. "Has that guy seen the stone in your hand?" Zhao Hongyu asked Emma. Little Emma nodded and replied, "Yes, he even wants me to tell him where I found it." Emma winked playfully at Zhao Hongyu. "Oh, so you told him?" After hearing Emma's answer, Zhao Hongyu became worried. If that guy really knew where the gold was found, things would become quite complicated. Zhao Hongyu was well aware of the greed of the white people in the Americas. The original motive for the voyages of Columbus and Magellan was, in essence, gold. Although over 100 years had passed since then, the European love of gold remained unchanged. It's conceivable that upon seeing the gold in Emma's hand, that person would be tempted by the possibility of a nearby gold vein. Driven by the lure of gold, he wouldn't necessarily commit any treacherous acts. Even a 200% profit would be enough to drive people to murder and arson, let alone a single gold vein. At this moment, Zhao Hongyu felt a surge of murderous intent. He felt he had to find an opportunity to eliminate Baker. As for the potential trouble and consequences of killing Baker, Zhao Hongyu wasn't worried at all. This was the Americas, a barbaric era, wasn't it? Every year, countless white and Indian conflicts erupted, and lives were cut short. Therefore, Baker's death wouldn't cause a major uproar. Zhao Hongyu had a very clear understanding of this issue. On the other hand, the gold vein was the greatest threat. If Baker spread this news, it was easy to imagine that it would attract all British immigrants in the Americas. Then, a war over the gold would be unavoidable. The cunning British would never confront the Mohicans head-on. They would rally other Indian tribes and attack them together. Even a tribe as powerful as the Mohicans would be unable to face such a large enemy force. Furthermore, the British, superior in both weaponry and tactics, would be watching closely, waiting for an opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. Baker must be killed. Only by killing him can the secret of the gold be preserved. Instantly, Zhao Hongyu made a decision. Strictly speaking, Zhao Hongyu wasn't a decisive killer in modern society. But after all, he had arrived in this era and experienced so much. His mentality had already undergone a significant change, becoming completely different from before. In the 6 months of 1620, Zhao Hongyu had already made the initial transformation from a modern man afraid of death and killing to one who had integrated into this era. Killing was a normal thing for people of this era. Zhao Hongyu must become like them. Of course, this didn't mean Zhao Hongyu would become a reckless killer. He had a bottom line: as long as his own safety wasn't compromised, he wouldn't kill. Baker's arrival had made Zhao Hongyu feel threatened. More specifically, he was certain Baker would stir up trouble for the gold. That would put not only the Mexican tribe in trouble, but also him. Zhao Hongyu didn't want to run away, and going south would be even more fraught. The Inca Empire was being slaughtered by the Spanish, and the entire Caribbean coast was in turmoil. Zhao Hongyu didn't want to go to that troubled land at this time. Compared to the south, North America was relatively peaceful. Central North America was also an option, but Zhao Hongyu still harbored a dream of a great voyage. If he went there, what would be the point of a great voyage? Furthermore, the resources there were not as abundant, which would have a significant impact on Zhao Hongyu's future. At the same time, reconnecting with other Indian tribes also carries significant risks, and Zhao Hongyu isn't willing to risk giving up everything he has. Therefore, killing Baker is the best option Zhao Hongyu could think of. The drunken guards, hauled to their feet amidst the shouts and curses of Baker's two guard leaders, supported each other as they walked away. Wang Shen and his men approached Zhao Hongyu. "We need to eliminate these guys. Their leader seems to have set his sights on gold," he said with a gleaming look as Wang Shen and his men gathered around him. Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Wang Shen and his men shuddered. This wasn't a good idea. Although they were genetically modified, they were educated in 21st century culture. Wang Shan and his men knew something about the character of the European immigrants who arrived in the Americas in 1620. These guys will do anything for wealth. After all, the history of the Americas is, strictly speaking, a long history of slaughter. Wang Shan and his men didn't object to Zhao Hongayu's proposal. After a brief glance, they all nodded to Zhao Hongyu. There are 35 of them, 34 of whom are guards besides Baker. Wang Shan relayed the information they had gathered to Zhao Hongyu. This isn't the place to discuss this. Let's return to our tents. Zhao Hongyu gestured to the group outside, with Emma, a young girl, standing beside him. Chief, we're speaking Chinese. These Indians won't understand, Wang Shan warned Zhao Hongyu. At this moment, Emma's father, Black Bear, a Mohican warrior, approached. Hey Tong, be careful. I know you need this stone, too. But that white man seems interested in it, and I'm worried he might come after you. Black Bear, having dealt with white people before, knew their character, hence his words to Zhao Hongyu. Sensing Black Bear's concern and kindness, Zhao Hongyu smiled and responded, thank you for your concern. I won't let these guys come back to trouble me alive. Although Zhao Hongyu smiled, his words betrayed a deep murderous intent. Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, sensing the murderous intent in his eyes, Black Bear paused for a moment before a strange smile broke out. If you can be of any use to me, you can come to me. I've long disliked these white people. If it weren't for Adidu's father constantly trying to stop me, I would have led my warriors to destroy the nearby white camp. Of all the Mohawks, Black Bear harbored the greatest hatred for white people. His son was killed by white people over a beaver pelt. Unable to find the murderer, Black Bear never avenged his vengeance. Of course, this wasn't unrelated to Adidu's father, Samra, the old Mohawk chief, suppressing Black Bear. Samra didn't want to provoke a conflict with the white people. If it weren't for Zhao Hongyu's appearance, Samra would have died of a severe cold, and Black Bear would have succeeded him as leader of the Mohican tribe. Although Atito, Samra's son, was qualified to take over the leadership, Atito couldn't match Black Bear in terms of prestige or other aspects. Black Bear, who succeeded him as leader of the Mohican tribe, would have led the Mohicans into a war, destroying 40 of the British's 65 settlements within 3 years, inflicting heavy losses on them. Of course, the Mohicans paid a heavy price for this. Ultimately, the British used divisive tactics to unite numerous small Indian tribes against the Mohicans, disintegrating the Mohican tribe, which originally numbered over 10,000, into a small, isolated tribe. By the 18th century, the Mohicans' assistance to the British led to their complete demise. This was the course of history, but Zhao Hongyu's appearance deviated. Since the old Mohawk leader, Samra, hadn't died, Black Bear inevitably didn't succeed him as leader of the Mohawk tribe. Thus, Black Bear's radical ideas remained suppressed by Samra. While Black Bear couldn't do anything publicly, he could still stir up trouble behind the scenes. Seeing the murderous intent in Zhao Hongyu's eyes, Black Bear knew he could find common ground with Zhao Hongyu on how to deal with white people. At the very least, he could secure the friendship of the son of a northern tribe leader who disliked white people. Zhao Hongyu wasn't stupid. He heard the subtext in Black Bear's words and roughly guessed at his underlying intentions. However, he didn't intend to refuse him, as he might actually need Black Bear's help. Yes, Baker's group consisted of 35 people. He had 15, so only 16, including himself, putting him at a numerical disadvantage. In this age of cold weapons, if he wanted to defeat Baker and his group, he would need a numerical advantage. It wasn't that Zhao Hongyu hadn't considered using a matchlock, but its accuracy was far too low, so using cold weapons would be better. I'll come find you later. I think we have something in common, Zhao Hongyu replied with a smile. Chapter 27 It's better to find Black Bear. After bidding farewell to Black Bear, Zhao Hongyu returned to his yurt with Wang Shen and the others. The 3 geneticists guarding Manhattan Island were also recalled. Zhao Hongyu's 15 subordinates were now fully assembled, representing the maximum force he could mobilize. When Zhao Hongyu first had several million, he considered whether to add more personnel or develop a flintlock rifle. After careful consideration, Zhao Hongyu chose to add more personnel. While the flintlock rifle could bring him significant profits, who would he sell it to? Selling it to the Indians would make him feel extremely insecure. Zhao Hongyu had few subordinates, and he hadn't yet secured his own safety. If he sold such a high-tech weapon as the flintlock rifle to the Indians, who knew what would happen? It wasn't that Zhao Hongai was being cautious, sometimes he had to consider many issues, especially when it came to his own safety. Therefore, Zhao Hongai ultimately chose to add more personnel. 3 million for research wasn't a lot, strictly speaking, but Zhao Hongai knew that the flintlock rifle couldn't be introduced to the world until he had absolute control. There are currently 78 immigrant camps in Virginia. The smallest has over 300 people, and the largest has 3,000. Wang Shan was the first to report after his men had settled down. Let's put this matter aside for now. Our immediate priority is to eliminate Baker and his gang and preserve the secret of the gold. Zhao Hongai interrupted Wang Shan, his eyes scanning his men's faces as he reminded them of the most pressing matter. Wang Shan didn't react much to Zhao Hongai's interruption, simply shrugging his shoulders helplessly. We can ambush them along the way. A surprise attack could wipe out half of them in a flash, suggested Song Hu, the most belligerent and skilled of the geneticists. Zhao Hongai nodded slightly and said, "That's a good idea. We can ambush them along the way." In the age of cold weapons, ambushes are a good strategy. After all, we're outnumbered and at a disadvantage, so it's possible to eliminate the enemy's effective forces in a short period of time. Zhao Hongai strongly supported Song Hu's proposal. For some unknown reason, among the 15 geneticists, only Wang Shan, Song Hu, and Zhang Tai possessed relatively high intelligence and conversed like normal humans. The 12 newly added geneticists, on the other hand, were somewhat dull, requiring orders to follow. They lacked the slightest opinion of their own, let alone suggestions. Therefore, the 12 geneticists could be ignored. The key was to rely on Wang Shan and his men's advice. Song Hu's suggestion is sound, but we must not forget that in the Cold War, we can't be overly optimistic. We're short-handed right now, and we can't afford losses. After analyzing the situation, Wang Shan interjected. We have 16 people on our side. Even if the first wave of attacks is successful and eliminates 16 of them, they'll still have 18 new recruits. We're still outnumbered, and that's something we have to consider. Wang Shan paused before continuing, and please remember that we can't kill all 16 in our first wave. At most, they'll be injured. So we have to consider that they still have fighting capacity. Zhao Hongai, who had been somewhat optimistic, calmed down after Wang Shan's reminder. He thought to himself, yes, Wang Shan is absolutely right. In the age of cold weapons, our attack wouldn't have been able to kill all 16 men in one go. Furthermore, people of this era were physically fit, and even injured they still had some fighting power. Furthermore, the enemy still had the advantage in numbers, which made things very difficult. Captain, if all else fails, let's use arquebuses. Long-range attacks should inflict some damage, reducing our losses in close combat, Zhang Tai suggested. After hearing Zhang Tai's proposal, Wang Shan, Song Hu, and Zhao Hongai all shook their heads. 17th century arquebuses were incredibly inaccurate and useless in combat. They could be used to intimidate the enemy, but relying on them to kill was far from reliable. Even in Napoleon's time, flintlock rifles weren't that formidable. Zhao Hongai still remembered watching a popular science film that touched on this very topic. In Napoleon's time, elite soldiers were essentially courageous individuals who wouldn't be intimidated by the sight of an enemy firing. Back then, flintlock rifles had a measly 5% accuracy rate, and that 5% was only achieved through sheer luck. Normally, at close ranges of around 20 meters, a lead bullet wouldn't hit the enemy. It was sheer luck, and the accuracy was abysmal. Of course, unless you were truly unlucky, or your opponent was incredibly lucky, that was another matter. The existence of the Q Party, a group of people, primarily compensated for the low accuracy rate. Think about it, with so many people lined up and firing, there's bound to be 1 or 2 bullets that hit the enemy. This phenomenon can be seen in some films. In some 21st century American blockbusters depicting the American Revolutionary War, scenes of the Q Party, a group of people, are often featured. Viewers often see 2 sides firing their rifles, only to see at most 2 or 3 men on each side fall. What does this indicate? It's a low accuracy rate. You have to remember that the American Revolutionary War took place in the 18th century, over 100 years more advanced than Zhao Hongai's own era. Yet, firearms back then were also woefully inadequate. The accuracy of the even older matchlock musket was even worse. Furthermore, the weight of a matchlock musket was incredibly heavy compared to a flintlock. It simply wasn't a viable weapon. Cold weapons would have been better. Forget that idea. Matchlocks are simply a burden. We might as well not use them. Wang Shan rolled his eyes at Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai, seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, knew his suggestion wasn't a good idea, so he gave an embarrassed chuckle. If all else fails, Chief, get some flintlocks. At least they'll be more useful than matchlocks. Finally, unwilling to give in, Zhang Tai offered a suggestion. Since matchlocks aren't working, then use flintlocks. Generally speaking, while flintlocks aren't particularly effective, they're still far superior to matchlocks, aren't they? Zhao Hongyu fell silent, rapidly weighing the pros and cons. Yes, the matchlock wouldn't work, but what about the flintlock? It was obvious that if they wanted to kill Baker and his group, they had to use firearms. Without firearms, it was unrealistic to expect to kill them without paying a price. But the problem was, if he took out the flintlock, what would he say if the Mohicans asked? This weapon was much more effective than the matchlock, and the Mohicans would surely be very interested. So, should he sell it to them? These were all questions he needed to consider. If he sold this weapon to the Mohicans, their power would undoubtedly increase dramatically, which would then put him in danger. Zhao Hongyu hated this kind of uncontrollable factor the most. He absolutely hated it. Then, without holding back, he shared his concerns with everyone. After hearing Zhao Hongyu's concerns, Wang Shan and the others fell silent, each pondering and analyzing them in their own minds. Unlike Wang Shan and the other two, the 12 dull-witted geneticists remained unconcerned, sitting there with stern faces, awaiting orders and then carrying them out. Damn it, it seemed Wang Shan and his group were the most reliable. He had no idea how this space-time trader could even work like this. Zhao Hongyu complained internally. Yes, many aspects of this space-time trader were logical, and Zhao Hongyu still hadn't figured out what was going on. The more confused he became, the more uneasy he felt. He hated this feeling uncertain. However, this matter was truly beyond his control. For example, Wang Shan and his group were different from the 12 geneticists who purchased them later, and they had initially been able to purchase cigarettes using the space-time trader, but now they were completely unavailable. It seemed he'd have to delve deeper into this artifact of his when he had time. Zhao Hongyu pondered this silently, and at the same time, made a decision. The leader's concerns are not unfounded. Revealing this weapon when our own strength isn't strong enough is truly unwise. Selling it or not, it's disadvantageous to us. Just as Zhao Hongyu was lost in thought, Wang Shan interrupted him. Oh, what do you think? Zhao Hongyu asked. Song Hu and Zhang Tai also turned their attention to Wang Shan. Here's what I think, Wang Shan said, gathering his thoughts and answering Zhao Hongyu's question. If we don't sell it to the Mohicans, they'll have a bad opinion of us, and if we do, we won't be safe. So, I think it's best not to reveal this weapon. It's best to use cold weapons while we haven't developed enough. Zhao Hongyu nodded silently, sighing inwardly. He felt like he had a mountain of treasure but couldn't use it, which was truly frustrating. Let's talk to Black Bear. I think he might be able to provide some manpower. Wang Shan finally offered the most appropriate advice. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: Pulling Mohawk onto the Chariot. Go find Black Bear. He's an angry Indian at heart, and he'll definitely agree to join forces with us to deal with those malicious white men. Wang Shan offered Zhao Hongyu a perfectly reasonable suggestion. And don't forget, Chief, Black Bear is incredibly influential within the tribe, and his philosophy is widely shared. So if he agrees, we won't have to worry about our manpower shortage. Wang Shan's analysis was clear and logical, and Zhao Hongyu understood it perfectly. After a brief moment of consideration, Zhao Hongyu nodded, looking at everyone seriously, and said, "Yes, Wang Shan is right. In this situation, I have no choice but to seek the help of Black Bear. With him on board, we'll be able to wipe out those white men without a word." Arriving in America in 1620, Zhao Hongyu had adapted to the local customs. Once a law-abiding man, he had now learned to solve problems through slaughter. The dozen or so scars on his body, including the knife scars running from the corners of his eyes to his mouth, betrayed Zhao Hongyu's past. To survive in this era and on this continent, sometimes killing is unavoidable, Zhao Hongyu wasn't some brainless saint. On the contrary, he knew he had to adapt to the new era and its rules. Only by adapting to certain things could one survive well. Seeing Zhao Hongyu agree to Wang Shan's proposal and make his final plans, Song Hu and Zhang Tai fell silent. They simply turned their gaze to Wang Shan, wondering if he had any further suggestions. Zhao Hongyu stood up, straightened his clothes, and glanced at Wang Shan and the others who were looking at him. It's decided. I'll go talk to Black Bear about this now. While those white men are still here, I must ensure their fate. If they leave, it's obvious that countless explorers will arrive in the future. I won't share the gold profits with anyone else. I prefer to keep them all. Zhao Hongyu stood there, raised his right hand, clenched it into a fist, and waved it vigorously. At the same time, his face was resolute and fierce, declaring to Wang Shan and the others that he would not give up his gold interests. Indeed, the gold could bring him a lucrative return and allow him to make a substantial profit in a short period of time. Zhao Hongyu would never give up such profits. Faced with those greedy white people, Zhao Hongyu didn't even consider cooperating. Compared to the white people, he wouldn't even cooperate with the Indians. Their greed was unstoppable. To cooperate with them would be like courting death, and he might end up being eaten alive by them. He only had 15 men under his command, far too few compared to the European immigrants on this continent. He had no way of suppressing them unless he had a large number of subordinates, which would give him sufficient influence and control. Looks like I need to find a way to win over Mohawk. We must be wary of the white people, Zhao Hongyu said seriously, looking at Wang Shan and the others. Wang Shan and the other two agreed with this. Before their own forces were strong enough, seeking help from outside forces was a reasonable option. Furthermore, the Mohicans were relatively simple-minded, making them an ideal partner. If they truly collaborated, this golden opportunity could bring them enormous rewards, perhaps even unexpected gains. Chief, how do you intend to draw the Mohicans onto our chariot? Wang Shan asked Zhao Hongyu, his question filled with curiosity. In Wang Shan's view, expecting the Mohicans to join them in a fight against the whites with just small commodities like pickled mustard greens, wooden bowls and plates, and matches was unrealistic. Indians may be simple, but that doesn't mean they're brainless or just fools. They know how to weigh the pros and cons. If Zhao Hongyu's proposed cooperation offered no real benefit to the Mohicans, then it would be empty talk and impossible to succeed. On the contrary, it would ultimately cause the Mohicans to lose their goodwill towards them. After Wang Shan raised his question, Song Hu and Zhang Tai both cast their gazes on Zhao Hongyu. The 12 geneticists sat around him, expressionless. The 12 geneticists held absolutely no interest in the conversation between Wang Shan and his companions and Zhao Hongyu. They only followed orders. Without them, they had no idea what to do. This was something Zhao Hongyu resented. While these 12 geneticists were a bit clueless, they were meticulous in following orders, even the most idiotic ones. For example, telling one of them to fight a furious black bear in single combat was a foolish order anyone with even a modicum of common sense would refuse to follow. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song Hu would even refuse outright. However, these 12 geneticists would carry it out completely disregarding their own lives. This, in turn, made Zhao Hongyu feel a little better. His gaze swept across the faces of the people, and he sighed inwardly at the dull expressions of the geneticists. He gathered himself together, coughed briefly, and then spoke. Ahem, I do have a rough idea in mind, but right now we need to deal with that British businessman. Let's talk about that after we've dealt with him. Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, Song Hu, and the others nodded in agreement. Zhao Hongyu finished speaking, then walked to the tent entrance and lifted the cotton curtain. The light from outside filtered in, making the tent less dim and more comfortable. Zhao Hongyu stood still and turned to Wang Shan and the others, saying, "You guys keep an eye on that British guy. I'll go to Black Bear and test his words. I hope everything goes smoothly and nothing goes wrong." After speaking to the group, Zhao Hongyu left. Following Zhao Hongyu's instructions before leaving, Wang Shan and the others also took action, fanning out to monitor the British businessman Baker and his group. Baker and his group were currently unable to leave the Moxigan tribe. The reason was simple: most of the guards were drunk, some even soundly asleep, unable to move. Leaving them in the Mohawk had been considered, but leaving them there would have left Baker and his men short-handed. Traversing the forests, mountains, and numerous Indian tribes with only a few men was unsafe. So Baker had no choice but to remain in the Mohawk, waiting for the guards to fall victim to the erguotao drink. But Baker was utterly anxious. He wished he could sprout wings and fly back to camp, find the governor, and tell him about the gold. With the army's support, and a viable plan, he could completely destroy the Mohawk and seize the gold mine. If he accomplished all these things, wouldn't he be able to become Master Baker? He might even receive a noble title from the royal family, and he would be a meteoric success. As for the governor, he wasn't worried at all. As long as he was given some shares in the gold mine, the governor would completely clear all obstacles for him. Baker understood the principle of sharing the benefits equally. He fully believed that with the governor's assistance and the strength of the army, everything could develop according to his vision. However, all this would have to wait until he returned to start implementing it. These damn guys, how could they drink so much? Thinking of this, Baker cast a hateful glance at the drunks who were staggering and occasionally talking nonsense, and cursed inwardly. I don't want to stay here at all. The thought of there being a gold mine here makes my heart burn. It's all because of these guys who are wasting my time, Baker complained quietly to the chief and deputy chief of the guard. Hearing Baker's muttered complaints, the mercenary leader, Cox, who had warned Baker earlier in the Mohican conference tent, gave a wry smile and replied, "Mr. Baker, be patient. These drunks will only need half a day to wake up. By then, we can continue our journey through the night and return to camp early tomorrow morning." Cox knew exactly why Baker was so impatient. "Cox, there's work to do now. These drunks will be asleep for at least half a day. Why don't you take advantage of this opportunity to find that little Indian girl and ask her where she found the gold nugget?" Baker's eyes flickered, especially when he mentioned gold. Baker believed that a nugget like this must be found in a rich gold mine. Only a large vein like this could produce such a nugget. Imagine how rich the ore must be to produce such a nugget. In reality, Baker had no idea that the gold in that vein had already surfaced. Its gold content was enough to drive people crazy, beyond his imagination. Even someone like Zhao Hongai was incredibly excited when he saw that vein. If Baker had seen that vein, he'd probably have fainted. Chapter 29. You're a noble person. I knew you'd come looking for me. My premonitions are always accurate. Strictly speaking, I consider myself more talented as a tribal shaman than a warrior. When Zhao Hongai found Black Bear, the normally stern Black Bear actually cracked a little joke, albeit a rather unfunny one. Zhao Hongai left his yurt and approached Black Bear's tent. He walked directly in front of Black Bear and sat down cross-legged, following his rather unfunny self-deprecation. After settling down, Zhao Hongai didn't immediately state his intentions, but instead looked around. "Where are your wife and little Emma?" he asked quietly when he saw that Black Bear's wife, Paula, and Emma were missing from the tent. Women shouldn't be present when men are discussing serious matters. I've already sent them away. I figured the less people who know about what we're about to discuss, the better. A strange glint flickered in Black Bear's eyes, and Zhao Hongai's heart sank. It seems that I must never think that all Indians are fools. Although they are very simple, it does not mean that they are idiots and can be fooled. After a brief conversation with Black Bear, Zhao Hongai felt that he should show more sincerity to Indians in the future. This is a real-life encounter, not reading a novel. The reason I came this time is simple. It seems that the Englishman also has his eyes on that kind of stone. Although they have not reached an agreement with the Mohawk tribe, I don't think they will give up so easily, Zhao Hongai asked tentatively. Black Bear nodded and said, "Yes, your guess is very accurate. I know the personalities of these white people very well. They will do anything to get what they want. We Indians have always despised them." As Black Bear said this, his face was full of disgust. Last summer, the whites set their sights on the foothills of a tribe near the Akarachi Mountains and tried to trade them. But the tribe refused, and the whites then instigated other tribes to destroy and exterminate them. This kind of thing has always been the whites' forte, and they ultimately got what they wanted. Black Bear recounted an incident from the previous year, proving the whites' unscrupulous nature. It also reminded Zhao Hongai that the whites were deeply concerned about the stone Emma had discovered. I understand that tribe, after all, it's their homeland. How could they possibly give it to the whites? But the methods they used are truly appalling. Zhao Hongai, upon hearing this, knew what was going on, so he echoed Black Bear's words. Black Bear looked at Zhao Hongai sternly and said, "So, what are your thoughts?" Zhao Hongai replied, "Kill those people. We absolutely cannot let word of this stone get out. At least not for a while." His words were resolute. "We can't attack them within the tribe. The fewer people who know, the better. And I can't mobilize too many people. While the tribe doesn't have a favorable impression of the whites, most of them don't want to be enemies with them. Black Bear explained his situation. There are 35 of them, and I have 16. I don't plan to attack them head-on, but rather to surprise them. Zhao Hongai then stated his plan. I can help you, but what's the benefit for me? Helping you is fine, but there has to be some benefit. Indians aren't stupid. This has been true since ancient times. Although Zhao Hongaiyu saved Emma, Black Bear's only daughter, Black Bear also provided Zhao Hongaiyu with considerable assistance. For example, regarding the matter of Manhattan Island, Black Bear spoke well of it to the old chief. Otherwise, Zhao Hongaiyu wouldn't have been able to obtain Manhattan Island so easily. Zhao Hongaiyu had already learned about this from Mekito. You know, this stone isn't very useful to you. But it's very useful to my tribe. I can trade it with our goods, and I guarantee you'll be satisfied with the price. Zhao Hongaiyu knew that gold would be extremely useful to him. As long as he controlled this gold mine, he would be able to achieve a qualitative leap in the near future. And if he ate meat, he always had to give them some soup, so as to win over the Mohicans. This idea had long been formed in Zhao Hongaiyu's mind. It was just that Black Bear had just asked, and Zhao Hongaiyu only answered him now, and the benefits Zhao Hongaiyu mentioned weren't referring to the Mohican tribe, but to you, Black Bear himself. Then, Zhao Hongaiyu explained how much stone could be exchanged for what kind of iron weapons and other goods, and Black Bear slowly nodded. Yes, Zhao Hongaiyu's price was very fair, which made Black Bear's heart flutter. Especially satisfying was the fact that Zhao Hongaiyu was only responsible for acquisition, not for taking ownership of the mining area. According to Zhao Hongaiyu's plan, Black Bear would gather the tribe's members and mine gold in the gold-rich forest. They would then bring the gold to Zhao Hongaiyu in exchange for what they needed. This was far more effective than hunting. Black Bear would then become the manager and owner of the gold fields, responsible for protecting them because it affected his personal interests. Zhao Hongaiyu had no other choice but to adopt this approach. First, he needed to win over the Mohicans, so he couldn't resort to the white people's dirty tricks to seize the gold fields. More importantly, Zhao Hongaiyu simply didn't have enough men. 15 people were simply unrealistic to manage the gold fields, let alone protect them. Black Bear, on the other hand, was a powerful figure within the Mohican tribe, second only to the chief and the shaman. Furthermore, he was a cynic, deeply hostile Indian, and held a deep dislike for white people. Therefore, Zhao Hongaiyu had no need to worry about the gold fields being seized by white people. Meanwhile, Black Bear was quite powerful, and with his abilities, he could definitely protect that area, far more effectively than Zhao Hongaiyu could. After considering all these factors, Zhao Hongaiyu chose this approach. But no matter what, Zhao Hongaiyu wouldn't lose out. 50 grams of gold could be exchanged for 10 iron axes, or 100 bags of preserved mustard greens, or other goods. And given the price of 50 grams of gold, 10 iron axes, or 100 bags of preserved mustard greens, it was a bargain. Zhao Hongaiyu would profit immensely, and he wouldn't take a single loss. Furthermore, that forest area was already under the control of the Mohicans. If he took over that area, it would leave a bad impression on them, significantly impacting their future. He wouldn't do such a foolish thing. Since there was a huge profit and a chance to leave a positive impression, why not take such a good opportunity? Besides, with Zhao Hongaiyu's current strength, he wasn't up to the task. If Zhao Hongaiyu had 10,000 men under his command, he wouldn't give up this gold vein, not even to the Mohicans. He was determined to keep a tight rein on it, for it was a massive cash machine. You mean, leave all this trade to me? Black Bear, who had been nodding, suddenly realized what was going on. He understood the meaning behind Zhao Hongaiyu's words and immediately reacted. Zhao Hongaiyu smiled and nodded. Yes, that place was discovered by Emma, so technically it belongs to her. So, it's not wrong to give it to you. After all, you're Emma's father, aren't you? Zhao Hongaiyu offered a passable excuse. You're a noble man, Black Eyes, Black Bear said sincerely, looking at Zhao Hongaiyu. Zhao Hongaiyu waved his hand. Let's deal with those white people talking about this right now, he reminded Black Bear. Now is not the time to discuss this. The two then discussed the location for the ambush on Baker and his group and the manpower Black Bear would deploy. Driven by profit, Black Bear displayed unprecedented enthusiasm. He patted his chest and assured Zhao Hongaiyu that he could mobilize 30 Mohawk warriors to absolutely wipe out Baker and his men from the area. Zhao Hongai was delighted. 45 men against 35. In the age of cold weapons, that was a sure win. There's no time to lose. Gather your men now. Once these white men leave the tribe, we'll begin our action, Zhao Hongai instructed Black Bear, having made his decision. Black Bear nodded and left his tent. Zhao Hongai also returned to his yurt. Meanwhile, Baker and his companions, arriving at the Mohawk tribe, hadn't noticed anything amiss. They didn't know at that moment that the god of death had already set his sights on them. At midnight, Baker's guards, knocked down by the Erguo Tao, woke up one by one. The hangover was not pleasant at all. The feeling of a sledgehammer hammering at their heads was unbearable. Damn it, you guys. Get up. We're leaving now, Baker urged the guards one by one, whispering to them. Hey, Mr. Baker, let's get up. Are you sure you want to travel in the middle of the night? One guard complained, his face pale and reluctant. Despite their complaints, at Baker's urging, they all rose, packed their belongings, and, under the instructions of the guard leaders, left the Mohawk tribe. Everything's done. After we leave the Mohawk tribe, we'll know where the gold vein is. Cax, the deputy leader of the mercenary group assigned to monitor little Emma, approached with a sack slung over his shoulder and whispered to Baker. Baker glanced meaningfully at the sack on Cax's shoulder, then glanced around the quiet Mohawk tribe, a sinister look on his face. Chapter 30, Tooth for Tooth. The sack slung over Cox's shoulder was bulging, and it was unclear what was inside. But from the look on Baker's face, it looked as if he knew. After hearing Cox's words, Baker glanced around the quiet Mohawk camp with a strange expression. Those damned natives. They actually rejected Master Baker's kind offer. So, if I find the location of the gold vein, expect your destruction. Baker's eyes flashed with murderous intent. This little one won't say anything no matter how I ask, so I had no choice but to knock her out and bring her back. Cox placed the sack on the ground and untied it, revealing a young girl with closed eyes. This girl was none other than Black Bear's daughter, Emma. It was unknown how Cox had managed to get Emma out of the tent in the middle of the night, knock her unconscious, and bring her back. But Baker didn't care about the process, he only cared about the result. Although he hadn't gotten what he wanted yet, little Emma was in his hands, and he believed he would soon have what he wanted. Baker was extremely confident of this. He was convinced that he couldn't handle a little Indian girl. Once they left the Mohawk tribe, he had 1,000 ways to make this Native American girl speak. He was sure of it. As for the methods, they might be a little bloody, but Baker didn't care. Besides, in the eyes of the white people, these uncivilized Native Americans weren't even considered human, but mere beasts. As beasts, they deserved to be enslaved, driven, and even slaughtered. Hadn't the Spanish done this in Central America, and they did it with great success? So why couldn't the British do the same? This uncultivated New World had fertile land, and they needed labor. And these Native Americans would make excellent slaves, if only they weren't so aggressive. Compared to the Maya in Central America, the Indians of North America were more aggressive, making them less suitable candidates for slavery. Fortunately, ships were now trading slaves from Africa. Baker and his companions set out on their return journey under cover of midnight, with a sleepy little Emma as their captive. Meanwhile, Emma's disappearance hadn't yet reached the Mohicans. Black Bear, before returning, had already gathered 30 of his men and, joining Zhao Hongai and his men, had rushed to the route Baker and his companions had to take, setting up an ambush and preparing a devastating blow. Black Bear's wife, Emma's careless mother, was still asleep under the influence of a drug, completely unaware that her child was missing. At the foot of the Acacia Mountains, outside a dense primeval forest, a road overgrown with half-human high grasses connected the Mohican tribe to the outside world to the south. Whether white people wanted to reach the Mohican tribe or the Mohican tribe wanted to reach other tribes in the south, this path was essential. The Mohicans called this road Laramark, which means trade route in Indian. On either side of the road lay a gloomy forest. Nature had miraculously split the forest in two, creating a path. Even in the 21st century, humanity could never comprehend the wonders of nature, the Creator. Zhao Hongai and Black Bear arrived at Laramak and chose a small hill. Wang Shen and the other geneticists were fully armed, with 2 low-quality axes strapped to the outsides of their thighs and a machete in hand. Black Bear and the 30 Mohawk warriors he led were similarly armed. Except that unlike Zhao Hongai and his geneticists, they sported wooden bows and arrows with hollow wooden shafts. Zhao Hongyu examined them and saw that the bows and arrows used by the Mohawk warriors were entirely made of wood, with no iron in the arrowheads at all. It was truly pitiful, not even a single iron arrowhead. Zhao Hongyu felt pity for the Mohawk, but he had no doubts or concerns about the lethality of these bows and arrows. After all, the Mohawk relied on these bows and arrows to hunt and fight other tribes. During his time in the Mohawk tribe, Zhao Hongyu had also witnessed Mohawk hunters using these seemingly unreliable bows and arrows to hunt large prey, bison. Think about it, a bison's hide is thick enough, but it's no defense against such arrows, and they're ultimately killed. If these bows and arrows were inlaid with a little iron, the bow's power would likely be greatly increased. However, Zhao Hongyu had no interest in improving the Mohawks' combat effectiveness, at least not yet. Besides these bows and arrows, the hollow wooden poles carried by the Mohawk warriors caught Zhao Hongyu's eye. Blow darts. Yes, those hollow wooden poles were a common weapon used by most North American Indian warriors, a conventional weapon. These hollow poles could be inserted with custom-made wooden spikes, allowing them to accurately hit targets within 20 meters. The thorns were coated with a uniquely North American anesthetic, a plant-derived anesthetic that renders the target inert for just tens of seconds, leaving them vulnerable to slaughter. Zhao Hongyu had never heard of or seen that plant before. It resembled a mimosa. Unfortunately, this plant vanished over 100 years later for unknown reasons. But in 1620, this supposedly extinct plant was still growing in Europe. Today, we'll ambush here. It's about a half-day's journey from the tribe. If my guess is correct, those white men will leave the tribe early tomorrow morning. That means we can eliminate them by noon tomorrow and return to the tribe for dinner that evening. Black Bear wasn't at all worried about attacking Baker and his group. In Black Bear's eyes, Baker and his group were as weak as groundhogs. Zhao Hongyu was a little nervous, but he didn't feel much pressure about attacking Baker and his group. After all, with Black Bear's help, they already had a significant advantage in numbers. Lying on the hillock, Zhao Hongyu casually picked a blade of grass and popped it in his mouth, then looked up at the brilliant night sky. Meanwhile, Wang Shen and the others sat down to recover. The 30 Mohawk warriors Black Bear had brought with him were each busy with their own activities. Some lay soundly asleep on the ground, some went to the nearby watering holes, and others took out the dried meat they had brought, tearing off pieces and slurping them up as a midnight snack. Of course, Zhao Hongyu had Wang Shen and the others distribute some pickled mustard greens to these people. I have absolutely no doubt about that, Zhao Hongyu replied as Black Bear sat down beside him. If all went well, it would only take 10 minutes to deal with Baker and his men. And since disposing of the bodies wouldn't take much longer, Black Bear's promise to return to the tribe for dinner tomorrow night was plausible. Hey Tong, your tribe is at war with the white people in the north. Aren't you afraid of the white people's fire-breathing weapons? Since Baker and his men hadn't arrived yet, they hadn't had much else to do since they had already set up an ambush. Black Bear sat down next to Zhao Hongyu, chatting with him to relieve his boredom. Afraid. But we have to fight. His tribe's war with the French in the north was originally Zhao Hongyu's ploy to deceive the Moxie-Cotter's higher-ups. This deception was also intended to make them more accepting of him. Generally speaking, natives of this continent are more easily accepted than outsiders. Zhao Hongyu, hailing from the 21st century, knew that xenophobia was a uniquely human mentality, regardless of era. Zhao Hongyu rolled over and sat up, looking at Black Bear seriously. Our homeland has been invaded by those white people, and our people have been massacred. Therefore, we must retaliate tooth for tooth, blood for blood. Only in this way can we show those white people how powerful we are, and let them know that we are not weaklings to be slaughtered. Yes, you're right. As soon as Zhao Hongyu finished speaking, Black Bear clenched his right fist and struck his left palm hard, shouting loudly at the same time. Black Bear, thrilled, agreed with Zhao Hongyu's words, especially the idiom tooth for tooth, blood for blood, which struck him as particularly apt. Hey Tong, I absolutely agree with what you said. Especially that tooth for tooth, blood for blood, I think it's absolutely spot on, Black Bear said excitedly, looking at Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu stared at the agitated Black Bear in amazement, unable to comprehend how a simple statement like his had evoked such a violent reaction. Little did he know that while the Indians had a legacy of knowledge, they lacked a cultural heritage. They couldn't even begin to compare to the rich heritage of China's 5,000 years of culture, and they couldn't even utter the phrase tooth for tooth. It was no wonder Black Bear was so agitated. These words resonated with him, resonating perfectly with his inner thoughts. He had understood the meaning, but hadn't been able to articulate it. Now he finally knew the words to express himself. His excitement was palpable. At that moment, Zhao Hongyu had no idea that his words would become a rallying cry, inspiring countless angry young men within the Indian tribes. Once I've dealt with Baker and the others, with a gold weave mind, I should be able to significantly increase the number of my men. As long as we can hold out for a while, even white people won't be intimidated. At the same time, we should invest in the counterfeit umbrella to develop some new products. If we could develop high-quality seeds, that would be even better. Zhao Hongyu was well aware that food from the American continent was in short supply, even in Europe. I own the Manhattan plane. I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't utilize it. Ignoring the excitedly clamoring Black Bear, Zhao Hongyu's thoughts drifted far away. Chapter 31 Poema. There's movement over there. Just as Zhao Hongyu and his companions were resting in the open air, a Mohawk warrior on sentry duty crouched down and quietly approached Black Bear, whispering something in his ear. Black Bear then looked at Zhao Hongyu, waking him up and whispering, "It's not an animal, maybe a coyote or a hare." The morning sun had just peeked out, dispelling the dark veil of night. It was still very cold, and Zhao Hongyu, looking tired and helpless, replied to Black Bear, "Due to the temperature difference, although the ice and snow had melted, wisps of white mist still formed. In such weather, who would pass by here at this time of year? No matter which tribe they came from, they would have to set out in the middle of the night and arrive here in the early morning." Black Bear analyzed the situation for Zhao Hongyu, telling him about the scattered tribes. After listening to Black Bear's analysis, Zhao Hongyu rolled over and lay on his stomach, peeking half of his hut from behind the hillock and surveying the scene at the end of the road below. Unfortunately, due to the fog, visibility was somewhat low, and Zhao Hongyu didn't see anything. However, the noise coming from the white mist indicated that some people were indeed passing through the forest path below. Who could they be? Zhao Hongyu and his companions were hiding in a place that was difficult to detect, and the dense forest provided a natural shelter. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu didn't worry about them being discovered. Besides, with the fog so thick, he himself hadn't noticed them. So how could these sudden arrivals possibly notice them? After all, Zhao Hongyu and his companions were hiding quietly in an ambush. If they couldn't even conceal themselves, what good would it be? Zhao Hongyu observed for a moment, but saw nothing, so he slowly retreated. "I can't see clearly. The fog is too thick," Zhao Hongyu said to Black Bear with some resentment. Black Bear didn't respond, but tilted his head as if listening. Wang Shen and the others crouched behind the hillock with stern expressions, and so did the Mohican warriors Black Bear had brought with him. It was those Englishmen. I heard their conversation. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I recognized it as the language of the white people. Black Bear's words caught Zhao Hongyu's attention. He himself hadn't heard clearly, so the fact that Black Bear could hear clearly was simply amazing. Seeing Zhao Hongyu's astonishment, Black Bear grinned. "Why, you don't believe it?" Zhao Hongyu didn't know how to respond. He truly couldn't believe it. From such a distance, Black Bear could tell those people in the fog were Englishmen? Don't doubt my ears. I can hear the distant burrowing of groundhogs. It's a life-saving skill. Without this hearing, how could we fight the wild beasts in the forest? Hearing Black Bear's words, Zhao Hongyu felt relieved. Indeed, the Mohicans were still in a relatively primitive stage, not an agricultural people. Therefore, they relied on hunting to obtain food. Hunting, then, became a profession and an instinct. And in the dense jungle, they were also targets for the beasts as they hunted. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that they had developed good hearing. As Zhao Hongyu thought about this, the surprise on his face faded a little, no longer quite so exaggerated. So, these people are Baker and his group. Since Black Bear had said the people in the fog were speaking English, Zhao Hongyu knew it was Baker and his group. Who else could they be at this time and place? It's very likely Baker and his group. Black Bear nodded. But his expression showed a hint of confusion. He continued quietly, "I'm just a little puzzled. If the group in the fog were Baker and his group, then arriving here at this time would require them to leave the Mohican region in the middle of the night. That's completely unreasonable. Why would they leave the Mohican region in the middle of the night?" Black Bear wasn't stupid. He thought of some questions. Traveling at night was extremely dangerous, considering the numerous wild animals they'd encounter along the way. Under cover of darkness, the beasts could attack at any moment. Even Black Bear, the bravest warrior of the Mohawks, would rashly go out hunting at night. Hearing Black Bear's puzzled murmurs, Zhao Hongayu's heart sank. Abnormality is a sign of evil. It seemed Baker and the others had no good intentions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traveled at night. Who knows why they were heading back so early? Perhaps they were heading back to the settlement to find the governor of the settlement and tell him about the possible discovery of gold. Tell everyone to be prepared. When they approach, we'll attack. Black Bear pondered for a moment, but couldn't grasp the logic. He simply gave up on the idea. He figured, as long as he dealt with the white men, there was no point in worrying about it. Zhao Hongyu understood the key reason, but he didn't bother to confront Black Bear. Telling him about it was pointless anyway, and explaining too much would be a waste of time. Upon hearing Black Bear's command, the Mohawk warriors removed their bows and hollow wooden poles from their backs and placed them before them. They also inserted wooden spikes inlaid with pheasant feathers into the hollow wooden tubes. Wang Shen and the others also looked at Zhao Hongyu. Following Zhao Hongyu's signal, Wang Shen and his men also entered combat mode. The people in the fog, however, were still unaware of this. This damn fog. I hate this place, I hate these natives, I hate everything about it. After traveling through the night, Baker felt incredibly uncomfortable. He had been mumbling constantly the entire way. Having finally left the Mohawk, Baker could finally relax. However, whenever he thought about the possibility of a gold mine near the Mohawk, he felt a pang of discontent. Baker, offered such a good deal, and that damned old native didn't even agree. These natives are truly unreasonable. Baker considered his offer quite generous. But faced with such generous terms, the old Mohican chieftain actually refused to agree, which was truly unacceptable to him. Strictly speaking, it wasn't that Baker couldn't offer better terms. It was just that he considered what he'd given to those uncivilized natives more than adequate. As a businessman, especially a greedy one, he wouldn't offer anything better. If he could make more profit, why not take it? If the other party were a world-renowned figure, he certainly wouldn't entertain such an idea. But they were primitive natives, not to be considered human. It must be said that, to the Europeans of that era, the natives of the American continent weren't considered human at all. Only they were considered civilized humans. Little did Baker know that, in the eyes of some people, not only Indians, but even Europeans who considered themselves civilized were nothing more than natives. After muttering for a while, Baker turned and looked around. The guards' faces were all pale from the all-night journey, their fatigue evident. Mr. Baker, let's rest for a while. It's a bit damp and chilly this morning, and we need something to eat and warm ourselves up, said Cax, the mercenaries' deputy leader. Although Baker wanted to return to the migrant camp without delay, he couldn't ignore the concerns of the mercenaries. These mercenaries could be of great assistance to him, both now and in the future. Baker couldn't afford to offend them over such a small matter. So, after hearing Cax's suggestion, Baker nodded. It's best to hurry. We must get back to camp. I've been feeling a bit uneasy, like something's about to happen. Ever since leaving the Mohawk tribe, Baker had been feeling a bit uneasy, a nauseating feeling, though he couldn't quite place it. With Baker's agreement, Cax approached the mercenary leader, Marin, and whispered a few words. Marin then raised his right hand high and shouted, "Everyone, stop. Let's rest here." The exhausted mercenaries immediately sat down dejectedly on the ground. Under Marlin's direction, some mercenaries began to build fires and prepare breakfast, while others tied up the wagons and sorted the cargo. Cax unloaded a sack from a wagon and returned to Baker's side. "Sir, we can take this opportunity to ask this little native girl some questions," Cax said, untying the leather ropes that bound the sack. "Hopefully, we can get some useful information from her before we return to camp." Soon, a terrified Emma appeared. Naked, Emma's hands were tied behind her back, her ankles tightly bound, and a black rag gagged her. Woo! 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 Emma struggled, but her small size and strength, coupled with her bound hands and feet, meant she had no way of freeing herself. "Hey," Baker chuckled maliciously as he watched Emma struggle on the ground. He raised his hand and called the Indian guide Sandali over, and then said to him, "Ask this little girl where the stone was found. If she answers, you won't suffer. If she doesn't answer my question." Chapter 32, Beware of the Rat. Emma stared at the white men in horror, bewildered as to how she had fallen into their hands. And what had these seemingly ill-intentioned individuals done to capture her? Especially the fat white man she had seen yesterday, his expression seemed rather sinister. It was early spring, and though winter had passed, the weather was still bitterly cold. The temperature swings were especially dramatic in the early morning hours. Little Emma was naked, having been thrown into a sack and left to freeze on the carriage all night. Her mouth had already turned a stone blue. An expression of fear and panic crossed Emma's face, and she shivered uncontrollably, whether from the cold or fear. It was heartbreaking to watch. Unfortunately, Baker and Cox had no sympathy at all. They showed no reaction to Emma, a beautiful and lovely girl, shivering in fear and cold. Mr. Baker is asking you where you found those shiny stones yesterday. The Indian guide, Sandori, crouched down, leaning over and addressing little Emma with his tattooed face. Emma raised her arms and folded them across her chest, as if to dispel the cold and fear. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried, her body refused to control itself. The little one looks frightened, Mr. Baker. Looking at the trembling, unfocused girl, Kaxner shrugged and turned to Baker. Whatever you do, I need her to tell me what I want to know. Baker paid no attention to any of that. He only cared about the gold vein. And the little girl before him was the one who knew the location, so he had to pry open her mouth. He didn't care what means he used. Even if she was just a little girl, Baker wouldn't show the slightest bit of pity. Indians aren't really people. After hearing Baker's answer, Kaxner sighed and turned back to Sandori. To be honest, although Cox was a mercenary, that didn't mean he was cold-blooded. In his view, while the Native Americans were different from them, they were still human beings. However, this view is not shared by the immigrants. Modern Europeans had long since considered the American continent their own. The indigenous peoples of the continent were nothing more than uncivilized potential slaves. Sandali drew the dagger from his waist and slowly thrust it towards Emma's eyes. Little Emma looked at Sandali, his face covered in cyan tattoos, stabbing the dagger towards her eyes filled with even more fear. Sandali's left hand gripped Emma's jaw tightly, preventing her from moving. Little one, you'd better answer Mr. Baker's questions honestly. This will save you some pain. Otherwise, you'll suffer more than you can imagine. Sandali's words radiated a sinister aura, and poor little Emma's body trembled even more violently. After all, the little girl was only 11 or 12 years old. Meanwhile, Baker and his men were interrogating Emma, while the other mercenaries were making breakfast over a fire, some even taking a break. From behind a small mound in the forest, just a dozen meters from Baker's group, Zhao Hongyu and his men witnessed everything clearly. It's little Emma. How did she get captured by the white men? Zhao Hongyu was shocked when he saw Emma. Black Bear was also a little panicked, as she was the only child he had left after losing his son. What the hell is going on? Why is Emma in their hands? Why is this happening? Black Bear, the bravest warrior of the Mohawk tribe, seemed a little panicked. Zhao Hongyu saw Black Bear looking bewildered. Even panicked. However, Zhao Hongyu understood Black Bear very well. After all, the girl a dozen meters ahead, standing next to the white men, was Black Bear's daughter and his only child. Even if you were to encounter such a situation, not to mention Black Bear, even if you were to encounter it himself, his reaction would likely be stronger than Black Bear's. This test is both a warrior and an ordinary person. Don't panic yet. I think there must be a reason why Emma is in their hands. Zhao Hongyu reached out and pressed hard on Black Bear's shoulder, squinting his eyes and peeking through the mist. After a moment's thought, Zhao Hongyu understood the reason. It seems my decision to kill this guy was the right one. Judging from the fact that they captured Emma, it seems that the fat man named Baker has no ulterior motives. The reason is simple. Little Emma was the one who discovered the gold. So she knows the location of the gold vein. Capturing her means they can get the location from her. Within the Mohican tribe, these white people would never dare to do such a thing. But if they capture Emma, they can do whatever they want. After all, this place is far away from the Mohican tribe, and no one will know what they are doing to Emma. After figuring this out, Zhao Hongyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Even using such means on such a young girl, it's unjust that such a person should be killed. When Zhao Hongyu was about to kill Baker and the others, he felt a tinge of guilt. After all, he was a man deeply influenced by the 21st century. Although he was determined to integrate into this era, he still had some psychological barriers. But not anymore, because he was targeting bad guys, those who would even kidnap a little girl for profit. Zhao Hongyu's previous psychological burden also disappeared. These white people captured Emma because of the stones. Emma is the only one who knows about the mineral veins, and they can't mess with us. So little Emma is their best choice. Zhao Hongyu shared his suspicions with Black Bear. How could these damn white people attack a child? They have no shame at all. Black Bear cursed under his breath after hearing Zhao Hongyu's words. What should I do? My daughter is in their hands. If we attack, she will be in danger. Black Bear was a little hesitant at this point, worried that a fight would hurt Emma. How could this be possible? If they gave up this opportunity, Baker and his group would have to return to the British settlement. By then, it would be too late for them to do anything. And Zhao Hongyu absolutely couldn't let word of the gold mine spread, not for at least 3 months. Zhao Hongyu calculated that if everything went smoothly, he would be largely established in just 3 months. By then, his forces would have grown, and he would have the strength to fight the white people. Instead of being like he was now, struggling to even protect himself. Time. What Zhao Hongyu needed now was time, just a little bit of it. Therefore, he absolutely couldn't let Baker spread this news back. Zhao Hongyu could imagine that if Baker spread the news of gold near the Mohican tribe, it would undoubtedly cause great trouble for the Mohican tribe and put him in danger. Zhao Hongyu would never allow such a thing to happen. This was why Zhao Hongyu was so ruthless and determined to deal with Baker and his group. Now, a sudden change had occurred. Zhao Hongyu and his men, who had been ambushed, had not anticipated the appearance of little Emma among Baker's group, sending Black Bear into tailspin. This was not a good sign, and Zhao Hongyu felt things were getting a bit difficult. But Black Bear's concerns were not unfounded. If they launched an attack now, there was no guarantee that little Emma would be safe. After all, in a fight, no one would be able to focus on other matters, let alone care for little Emma. Zhao Hongyu couldn't tell Black Bear to ignore his daughter and just charge forward. If Zhao Hongyu did so, his previously good relationship with Black Bear would suddenly deteriorate, potentially turning them into enemies. This was something Zhao Hongyu absolutely did not want to see. After careful consideration, Zhao Hongyu concluded that the best solution was to rescue little Emma while also eliminating Baker and his men. Black Bear, don't worry. None of us could have anticipated this. It happened so suddenly, Zhao Hongyu whispered. Unfortunately, Zhao Hongyu's words of comfort had little effect on Black Bear. Watching Sandori's left hand pinching Emma's jaw, his right hand holding the knife inching closer to her eyeballs, Black Bear's eyes instantly turned red. His facial muscles tensed, his teeth clenched, and his right hand, gripping the machete at his waist, turned pale from the exertion. Sandori. Damn punk jackal. I must chop off his limbs and rip out his heart to quell the hatred in my heart. By Quetzalcoatl, I, Black Bear, will do this. Wang Shan, think of a way to rescue Emma first. If we don't, our plan will fail. Unaware of Black Bear's overreaction, Zhao Hongyu whispered something to his men. No, we can't wait any longer. If we wait any longer, our daughter will be taken back to Camp I White Belt. It would become very troublesome by that time, and the other party had already started to torture Emma, so Black Bear thought he should take a gamble. Thinking of this, Black Bear stood up and rushed down the hill. And the 30 Mohawk warriors who followed him, after seeing Black Bear rushing out, also followed behind him, drew their bows and arrows, and rushed out of the hill while shouting woo! Woo! Because Black Bear rushed out so fast, Zhao Hongyu didn't react. Black Bear, what are you doing? Zhao Hongyu only had time to shout, and then he could only watch the back of Black Bear walking away with an axe raised high. Chapter 33 Die with unclosed eyes. Too impulsive, too impulsive. Black Bear, worried about his daughter, rushed out without a word, instantly exposing Zhao Hongyu and the others. This left Zhao Hongyu helpless. At this point, Zhao Hongyu had no other options. He immediately averted his gaze and hurriedly ordered Wang Shan, take 2 men and recapture Emma and protect her. Do not let her come to any harm. Then, leading the Jin men, they rushed out of the hilltop. Enemy attack, Rua! Rua! The cry immediately attracted the attention of the sentries. Whoosh! The mercenary sentry barely had time to shout enemy attack before a sudden arrow pierced his neck and he fell to the ground, seemingly rendered incapacitated. The fallen mercenary struggled to remove the arrow, but it was impossible. Blood foamed continuously from his mouth. Black Bear and the others dashed past, and someone, unknowingly, raised their axe and struck him fiercely on the forehead. Crack! With that, the unfortunate fellow was plunged into eternal darkness. Zhao Hongyu crouched slightly, following Black Bear and the others with his usual tactical moves. He had learned all this from Wang Shen and the others. Even though Wang Shen and the others were conscripts, they could still learn a great deal from them. Following Black Bear and the others, Zhao Hongyu watched the Mohicans run in disarray. However, Zhao Hongyu discerned a trick. On the surface, the Mohicans appeared to be chaotically following Black Bear's attack. But a closer look revealed something else entirely. 30 Mohicans, all still at some distance from the enemy, unleashed 2 volleys of arrows. After firing their 2 volleys, half of the warriors, machetes in their right hands, flung axes in their left. The other half of the Mohican warriors would pick up their blowpipes and fire once, then, like their companions, engage the enemy in close combat. This was a highly structured attack pattern, far from the unregulated one Zhao Hongyu had assumed. The Mohicans had inhabited this land for generations, battling nature, animals, and other tribes. How could they lack even basic combat experience? The Mohicans' rise to dominance in this region hadn't been smooth sailing. God knows how many battles and bloodshed they'd endured. Puff. Snap. The sound of arrows piercing flesh and the dull thud of iron weapons slashing against flesh echoed continuously. Within a few breaths, Black Bear and his men were engaged in combat with Baker's mercenaries. From the outset, the tide shifted in Zhao Hongyu's favor. As Black Bear and his men charged forward, 3 or 4 of Baker's 35 mercenaries were felled by arrows. Some casualties were sustained, though none caused vital damage. The poisoned Mohawk darts were the primary culprit. The mercenaries, clad in iron double armor, offered superior defense compared to Zhao Hongyu's men. This was the reason they withstood the heavy blows of arrows and axe fire. However, the blows still cost them 4 or 5 men. Due to the rapid onset of the poison, they were completely incapacitated. Zhao Hongyu and Black Bear, on the other hand, had over 40 combined. In terms of numbers, Zhao Hongyu and his men had the upper hand. Close combat with cold weapons was brutal, a fact Zhao Hongyu knew well. But in just a dozen seconds or 3 or 4 breaths, 5 or 6 Mohawk warriors had fallen, while the mercenaries, clad in superior armor, had lost a man. The tide began to turn against Zhao Hongyu's side. Of course, this was only temporary, because it was Black Bear and his Mohawk warriors who were now engaging the mercenaries. When Zhao Hongyu, Wang Shan, and the others joined in, the tide of battle completely turned. The genetic warriors were no less powerful than the Mohawk warriors. They were even stronger than the iron-armored mercenaries, especially with their bizarre tactical coordination, which saw them instantly knock out over a dozen men. Black Bear sought out the punk Indian, Sandori, because he had just seen clearly that this man was torturing his daughter. Sandori crouched, a dagger in each hand, staring at Black Bear like a cheetah. Black Bear, on the other hand, stood straight, squinting at Sandori. White-skinned lackey, I'll tear out your heart and chop off your limbs to quench my rage. Black Bear held a machete in one hand and an axe in the other, and the weapons clashed repeatedly, making a clanging sound. Come on, you coward, Black Bear goaded Sandori. Sandori didn't care for Black Bear's provocation. He was, however, more nervous than Black Bear. From the corner of his eye, Sandori could clearly see the white men he had brought with him being slaughtered by the Mohicans. His side was already at a disadvantage, and this had a profound impact on Sandori. Wue. Compared to the common daggers used by Indians, the machetes Zhao Hongyu sold to the Mohicans had significant advantages. These machetes were 1 meter long and resembled the Tang dynasty's horizontal swords. When the Mohicans first saw them, they were captivated. Though made of inferior iron, the blade held a remarkably sharp edge. After all, even if it was a knockoff, it was a 21st century product. After dispatching Sandori, Black Bear placed his cross axe on the outside of his right leg. He walked over to Sandori's body, pulled a dagger from his waist, and scalped him. Meanwhile, the battle on the other side was drawing to a close. Cold weapon combat was swift, requiring no significant delay. Especially when one side launched a sudden attack, the situation was even more swift. In less than 5 minutes, Baker and his mercenaries lay sprawled on the ground. The portly Baker, his head split open by someone unknown. His white brains spilling onto the ground in a tragic display. His eyes were still open, revealing his unresolved death. However, Zhao Hongyu didn't even glance at him. Many nearby survivors groaned in agony. Song Hu, go finish off those white men. I don't want to hear them groan anymore. Zhao Hongyu called Song Hu over and instructed him. Song Hu nodded, then, machete in hand, led several of his men to finish off Baker's guards one by one. Cruel? Zhao Hongyu didn't consider himself cruel. That was the way things were in this era. If you don't kill, you'll be killed. Since he had already made this decision, he couldn't be soft-hearted. Wang Shan dealt with the mercenaries, while the Mohawk warriors scalped them. Brother, supported by Zhang Tai, little Emma, tears streaming down her cheeks, threw herself into Zhao Hongyu's arms. Where's your father? He was the first to rush out to save you. Zhao Hongyu comforted the little girl, then pointed to Black Bear, who was slashing at Sandori's heart with a dagger. Emma was wearing a rather large green military coat. It was Zhang Tai's own coat. Seeing the girl naked, he took off his own and put it on her. Having Zhang Tai take the girl to Black Bear, Zhao Hongyu called out to Wang Shan and asked, "How many men have we lost?" Although the situation in the previous battle was extremely favorable for their side, and they were dominating Baker's side, Zhao Hongyu clearly saw that many Mohawk warriors had also fallen. In such a cold weapon battle, expecting a complete victory for their side was unrealistic. Only 2 of our genetic soldiers suffered minor injuries. They were just stabbed in the back and arm. Nothing serious, Wang Shan replied quietly. He continued in a low voice, but the Mohawks weren't faring so well. They lost 5 men, 2 seriously wounded, and 11 slightly wounded. Zhao Hongyu lowered his head, having never expected the Mohawks to suffer such heavy losses. These British have excellent armor, and the Mohawks don't have much, so it's natural that they've suffered heavy losses. Seeing Zhao Hongyu's disappointment, Wang Shan explained. After all, there were deaths, and this was caused by him, so he should express his gratitude. In the Mohawk tribe, men are the backbone of the family. Now that men have died in battle, what will become of their families? Zhao Hongyu pondered this question. His conscience compelled him to ponder it, and he couldn't avoid it. We'll discuss this when we get back. We have to give an explanation to these fallen soldiers. First, bury these British. It wasn't the time to discuss this yet, so Zhao Hongyu began to order his men to destroy the bodies and eliminate all traces. Following Zhao Hongyu's orders, the geneticists set to work. Black Bear, having finally vented his fury, ripped out Sandali's heart and severed his limbs. Then, hugging his daughter, he walked over to Zhao Hongyu. After we bury these white men, we'll go to Mohawk. I'll give you an explanation for the soldiers who died in battle. Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Black Bear was visibly taken aback. Chapter 34 Ready. Are you really going to do this? After hearing what Zhao Hongyu had just said, Black Bear sat there in a daze, staring at him in disbelief. He had never imagined that he would actually compensate the families of the warriors who died in battle. Although he didn't know what this meant, Black Bear vaguely felt it was a good thing. After all, the Moxigan tribe loses many warriors every year. They either die fighting wild beasts or in minor conflicts with other tribes. This happens every year and is inevitable. But those dead warriors are just dead. They don't care about the dead, and they never have. They certainly don't even consider offering compensation to their families. This is why Black Bear seemed a little surprised after hearing Zhao Hongyu's words. Half a day later, Zhao Hongyu and his men had returned to the Moxigan camp. When Zhao Hongyu told Black Bear about his plan, he was already sitting in Black Bear's tent. Before returning, they buried the bodies of Baker and the others, erasing all traces of their whereabouts. Add to that Wang Shan and his men's finishing blows, and no one would survive. It could be said that the secret of the gold mine deep in the forest near the Moxigan tribe had been preserved for now. Looking across at Black Bear, whose face was filled with astonishment and disbelief, Zhao Hongyu said seriously, "Those soldiers died for our business this time, so we must provide them with some compensation. And have you ever considered how their families will live after their deaths?" Black Bear was unsure how to respond, having never considered such a question before. "Well, we haven't thought about that before," Black Bear grunted, his face flushing. Zhao Hongyu shook his head helplessly, and said to Black Bear with deep sorrow, "That's truly wrong. Have you ever considered the pain of those men, the pillars of their families, dying in battle? Will their wives, children, and elderly parents suffer? Will their lives be plunged into hardship, even starvation?" Black Bear nodded, remembering that after soldiers died in battle, their families often faced the same situation Zhao Hongyu described. Seeing Black Bear nod, Zhao Hongyu said, with a rather pretentious air, "We can't let the soldiers bleed and cry, and their families suffer." Hearing Zhao Hongyu's words, Black Bear was instantly shaken. He felt Zhao Hongyu was absolutely right. He had never considered this. Soldiers fighting for the tribe, only to die while their families starved, was deeply wrong. He had simply not considered this before, but now that Zhao Hongyu had spoken about it, Black Bear felt a deep sense of unease. Especially Zhao Hongyu's words, "Don't let the soldiers bleed and cry," looked so well put. He couldn't have said anything like that himself, they were so precise and so moving. "Alright, since you want to benefit the families of the fallen soldiers, I won't stop you. You're kind-hearted anyway, so I'll just ignore what I said earlier." It turned out that when Zhao Hongyu had mentioned compensating the families of the fallen soldiers, Black Bear had thought it was unnecessary. After Zhao Hongyu's explanation, Black Bear understood a lot more, so he stopped trying to stop him. Precisely because of this understanding, Black Bear felt even more strongly that his previous assumptions had been pure idiocy. From the bottom of his heart, Black Bear looked up to Zhao Hongyu again. "I'll inform the leader of this method. If possible, we should all implement it in the Moxigan tribe. I think it will be very beneficial for uniting the tribe." Black Bear smacked his dry lips and looked at Zhao Hongyu seriously. Black Bear wasn't stupid. With even a little bit of common sense, he could see the problem clearly. "This is a matter for your Moxigan tribe. I'm only responsible for the compensation for those killed in this battle." Zhao Hongyu wouldn't interfere in the internal affairs of the Moxigan tribe. However, Zhao Hongyu could imagine that if Black Bear proposed such a proposal, his reputation within the Moxigan tribe would be greatly enhanced. Then, it might even influence the Ditto's father, the current leader, Samura. But that wasn't Zhao Hongyu's concern. Furthermore, Zhao Hongyu was leaning towards supporting the radical Black Bear in power. He could see that Samura was somewhat afraid of the white people and didn't want to offend them. If a conflict arose between them and the white people and they needed an alliance, Samura would definitely not be the right choice. But Black Bear was different. He was a passionate member of the Mohawk tribe, in 21st century parlance, an angry young man, and he was deeply opposed to the white people. Therefore, if he took control of the Mohawk tribe, he would definitely be a good candidate for a future alliance against the white people. "Hey Tong, you told me earlier that I should be the one to develop that golden stone vein. I've thought about it carefully and think it's best to leave it to the entire tribe." Black Bear then told Zhao Hongyu another story. Zhao Hongyu looked at Black Bear with curiosity. He didn't understand why Black Bear would give up such a good opportunity to give the entire tribe such tangible benefits. After all, if Black Bear managed the gold mine, the gold he mined daily could be exchanged for a large amount of supplies. Mohicans who wanted to work in the gold mines needed Black Bear's approval. Black Bear had, in fact, won over a large number of people within the Mohican tribe. Due to vested interests, these people often stood up to support Black Bear. Why would Black Bear give up such a good opportunity? Zhao Hongyu had carefully analyzed the various benefits involved. It was precisely because of this inability to understand that Zhao Hongyu was extremely puzzled. Seeing Zhao Hongyu looking at him doubtfully, Black Bear raised his hand and scratched the back of his head, then chuckled and said, "I'm okay at hunting and fighting, but I can't handle the management you mentioned. Besides, it's such a big place, and I don't know how to collect that kind of stone, so I must have the help of my tribesmen." After a pause, Black Bear continued, "And collecting that kind of stone definitely requires a lot of people. I can't muster so many people, so I need the help of many tribesmen in the tribe. At the same time, it's useless for me to have so many supplies. Even if I can eat a lot, I can't eat so much, so it's better to let everyone come together." After listening to Black Bear's story, Zhao Hongyu understood what he was worried about and thinking. After closing his eyes and carefully considering the situation, Zhao Hongyu said to Black Bear, "Then you can be responsible for guarding that area and preventing people from other tribes from entering. As for mining, you can tell Chief Samura to let the women and children who have some work do the work. The men, aside from some who will accompany you to guard the mining area, can still go hunting. I'm sure no one will refuse such an arrangement." Black Bear completely accepted Zhao Hongyu's offer. It was simply irresistible, and the benefits to the Moxigan tribe were enormous. The women and children couldn't go hunting, so they stayed home all day. But having something to do that brought some benefits to the family was something no one would refuse. Zhao Hongyu also had a plan for this offer. He was currently short on manpower, and developing the area alone was a stretch. Therefore, he could only leverage the Moxigan's abundant human resources to reap the benefits for himself. If he had more manpower, let alone this gold mine, Zhao Hongyu would have already begun exploiting the forest resources surrounding the entire Moxican tribe. Of course, the most important reason was that the forest didn't belong to Zhao Hongyu. Instead, it fell under the jurisdiction of the Mohican tribe. Zhao Hongyu had no right to acquire the wildlife, plants, or even trees. If Zhao Hongyu deceived the Mohicans and used underhanded tactics to gain control of the area, it would reflect badly on him. After all, there were still white people with ill intentions in this era. If they said anything to the Mohicans, it would sour Zhao Hongyu's relationship with them. To avoid this, Zhao Hongyu had to cooperate with the Mohicans and gain their support. He also had to offer the Mohicans satisfactory benefits. Only in this way could the friendship be preserved. Zhao Hongyu wouldn't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Black Bear responded, "I think the tribesmen won't object to this kind of cooperation. I can convince them," he assured. "Black Bear, don't you think it was too dangerous for you to rush out that morning?" After everything was settled, Zhao Hongyu looked at Black Bear with a serious expression and recounted the morning's events. Yes, Black Bear rushed out without even saying hello, although he did it because of his daughter. But it affected the entire plan, and even almost killed little Emma. If Wang Shen and the others had not run fast at that time, Sandali would probably have killed little Emma with a knife when Black Bear got in front of them. Thinking of this, Zhao Hongyu felt that it was necessary to talk about this issue. When Black Bear heard Zhao Hongyu mention this, he couldn't help but laugh awkwardly, looking very embarrassed. Then, Black Bear was like a child who had made a mistake, and was scolded by Zhao Hongyu. Fortunately, little Emma was with her mother, otherwise, seeing such a scene, how could Black Bear, as a father, have any face? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35, Beast, Let Go of That Girl. Let me do it. Time flew by, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Baker was like a tiny wave, vanishing in the vast torrent of history without a ripple. During this time, Black Bear informed the Mohicans of his plan to collaborate with Zhao Hongyu. The old chief, Samra, felt that this would be beneficial to the Mohicans and agreed. With the old chief's approval, everything went smoothly. Black Bear recruited 200 Mohican warriors, who became managers of the gold mine under the guise of protecting the mine. Meanwhile, the Mohican women who had work to do in the tribe flocked to the gold mine deep in the forest in groups of 2 or 3 to work as miners. They had nothing to do at home, so coming here to find rocks could be exchanged for food. What was there to be dissatisfied about? Even the children could do this, so the Mohican women burst into enthusiasm. The families of the fallen Mohawk warriors each received 1,000 kilograms of stale rice as compensation from Zhao Hongyu, leaving them incredibly grateful. A single life was only worth 1,000 kilograms of rice. And stale rice at that. Zhao Hongyu felt like a complete scumbag, but even so, in the eyes of the warriors and Black Bear who had participated in the ambush, he was considered the most noble of men. This left Zhao Hongyu feeling both amused and embarrassed. But he wouldn't bother explaining anything, after all, it was very beneficial to him. The nickname Noble, Fair, and Kind Black Eyes quietly spread throughout the Mohawk tribe, much to Zhao Hongyu's surprise. Everything had returned to normal. At least, on the surface, it seemed normal. Not many people knew about the events of the previous few days. The Mohawk warriors who had participated in the ambush on the whites had received numerous benefits from Zhao Hongyu, and they had sworn to keep their mouths shut. Although Zhao Hongyu had no idea if their oath would hold true, he had no idea. But given the current situation, he had no other choice but to trust these Mohawk warriors. Little Emma had become taciturn after this incident, which deeply distressed Black Bear, yet he seemed helpless to see his daughter in this state. Not only him, but even Zhao Hongyu was powerless to help. Because of this, Black Bear often beat his wife at night, believing that it was because she hadn't been watching the child that Emma hadn't been taken away. Finally, it was only after Zhao Hongyu's persuasion that Black Bear let his poor wife go. Technically, Black Bear's wife was also a victim, and Black Bear's venting his anger on her was what Zhao Hongyu disliked most. But Zhao Hongyu couldn't intervene in other people's family affairs, and he had no right to interfere. All he could do was persuade Black Bear to stop beating his wife. Meanwhile, the taciturn little Emma, like a little tail, began to follow Song Hu around all day, and the two of them acted mysteriously. During the battle against Baker's group that day, Song Hu demonstrated formidable combat prowess. He single-handedly eliminated 7 or 8 mercenaries, and it was precisely because of this achievement that the Mohawk warriors who participated in that battle expressed their deep respect for him. A strong person, regardless of age, always has admirers. Zhao Hongai's team earned the respect of Black Bear and his companions. Little Emma watched Song Hu slaughter his enemies with deft movements. This deeply shocked the young girl, and she became Song Hu's unshakable companion. What do you think, little Emma is doing following Song Hu around all day? Seeing little Emma following Song Hu around all day, and the two of them appearing to be deeply secretive, Zhao Hongaiyu turned and whispered to Wang Shan, who was following behind him. The Mohawk women and children around them were busy, standing in the icy stream, scooping sand from the water with iron pots and slowly sifting through something. The Mohawk warriors and guards, led by Black Bear, were vigilantly observing the surrounding situation. After all, this was a forest, where wild beasts roamed frequently, and they didn't want their people to come to harm. Hidden in the dense foliage of towering trees, some Mohawk warriors concealed themselves well. If Zhao Hongaiyu hadn't known where they were hiding, he wouldn't have been able to detect them. Perhaps, little Emma has a crush on Song Hu. Girls these days mature early, so it's not impossible, Wang Shan replied solemnly, looking at Song Hu, who was chatting with little Emma not far away. What? Emma has a crush on Song Hu? Zhao Hongaiyu's eyelids twitched. He found this unbelievable. Little Emma was only 11 or 12. Even if she was precocious, she couldn't be this mature. But seeing Wang Shan's serious expression, Zhao Hongaiyu also felt that this was a bit far-fetched. As Wang Shan had said, this era wasn't his own 21st century. It was understandable that girls these days matured a bit early. Even in the 21st century, elementary school students dating was no longer news. Zhao Hongaiyu's composure waned at the thought. However, if little Emma truly had a crush on Song Hu, he wouldn't object. After all, love was a free choice, and he had no reason to object. At that moment, Song Hu suddenly led Emma into the distance of the forest, with little Emma following him with a tense expression. Ever since she was rescued, Emma's innocent demeanor had vanished, replaced by a stern expression. Let's go over and see what they're up to, Zhao Hongaiyu's curiosity flared. Anyway, things are now on track, so he doesn't need to be here to watch. Things at the gold mine were simple. The Mohawk women would collect the gold they found, and when they accumulated a certain amount, they could bring it to him to trade for items. Of course, a portion of the gold the women found would be given to Black Bear as a reward for his protection. Following Song Hu from a distance, Wang Shan said to Zhao Hongaiyu, Chief, perhaps we should teach the Mohicans how to trade with distant tribes. Otherwise, we won't be able to grow and become stronger. Furthermore, we can use trade to attract other tribes and get them to relocate near the Mohicans. As long as they can't leave our goods, we can use some means to keep them working for us. What Wang Shan was talking about was something Zhao Hongaiyu and the others had secretly planned long ago. Indeed, if the gold mine hadn't been discovered near the Mohicans might have followed Zhao Hongaiyu's lead and started logging. After all, relying solely on hunting to trade with Zhao Hongaiyu was unrealistic. Most of what Zhao Hongaiyu was trading was necessities. These goods consumed quickly and in large quantities, requiring the Mohicans to have sustained purchasing power. However, it was clear that the Mohicans' purchasing power was already dwindling. Therefore resources for trade had been depleted. Under these circumstances, they must find new resources to trade with Zhao Hongaiyu. Besides abundant animal and land resources, the American continent also boasts abundant forest resources. This is something Zhao Hongaiyu has always coveted, but his lack of manpower has prevented him from making a move. In the 21st century, the price of timber has remained high. If it could be sold through the trader, it would be a lucrative source of income. After all, the 21st century's population explosion has put a severe strain on arable land. Timber has always been a scarce commodity in the international market, and Zhao Hongaiyu, no idiot, is well aware of this. Timber from the American continent, for example, could certainly fetch a good price. Its value could even exceed the profits from gold mines. It's entirely possible. Furthermore, given the current forest resources, there's enough to sustain Zhao Hongaiyu's trade for 100 years. Of course, that's assuming no destructive logging is involved. Hearing this, Zhao Hongaiyu nodded. Yes, The Mohicans can be our partners. I've already gained some reputation, and the Mohicans have a strong favorable impression of us. These are the foundations for deep cooperation. I think we can begin this plan soon." Zhao Hongyu wholeheartedly agreed with Wang Shan's suggestion. The two chatted quietly, trailing behind Song Hu and Emma. The early spring sun filtered through the dense foliage, casting specks of golden light. The constant chirping of birds echoed from all around. This was America in 1620. Ancient trees, so large that it took several people to hug them, were covered in lush green moss. The damp air obscured the sun's warmth. A slight chill still permeated this early spring of March. In the distance, Song Hu and Emma chatted as they walked. Unfortunately, due to the distance, Zhao Hongyu had no idea what they were saying. It had been several months since Wang Shan and his companions arrived in the Mohican tribe, and they had learned a fair bit of the Mohican language. While his speech wasn't entirely fluent, he was still able to manage a few simple ideas. Therefore, Song Hu and Emma couldn't help but wave their arms and gestures as they communicated. Neither Song Hu nor Emma knew yet that two men, ignited by a passion for gossip, were following them. After about 5 minutes of walking, Song Hu and Emma arrived at an open area in the forest near the gold mine. Thick green grass covered the area, obscured by lush vegetation, resembling a small artificial botanical garden. Zhao Hongyu raised his hand and gently parted the branches blocking his path, peeking over. He saw Song Hu remove his green military coat and underwear, revealing his sleek, dark torso. Was this guy trying to outdo the other? Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan both shared expressions of astonishment. Wang Shan smacked his lips and whispered something that made Zhao Hongyu's balls ache. "Beast! Let go of that girl, let me do it." Chapter 36. So that's it. Beast! Let go of that girl, let me do it. Wang Shan actually understood that. He could actually say it at such a time. This truly gave Zhao Hongyu a whole new perspective on genetic humans. He wondered who had created that strange space-time traitor, and how could their genetic human product actually have such a function? Of course, not every genetic human was like that. The 12 genetic humans Wang Shan and his team later created were just as dull and indifferent. It seemed the space-time traitor must have some quirks, and he needed to figure it out. Zhao Hongyu withdrew his thoughts. He didn't even have the heart to complain about Wang Shan, who looked so jealous and envious. Now Zhao Hongyu was focused on whether Song Hu and little Emma were really going to do something in this place. "Hush, or they'll find out," Zhao Hongyu whispered to Wang Shan, then turned his gaze away again. Wang Shan raised his hands and gestured at his ribs, then pulled a dagger from his waist and handed it to little Emma standing before him. What was going on? Could it be some kind of SM? That wasn't the way to go. These genetic people were going to be really fierce. Zhao Hongyu felt like he didn't quite understand the personalities of these genetic people. Little Emma took the dagger from Song Hu and performed various combat moves with it, following Song Hu's instructions. Song Hu took a few steps, seemingly correcting her from time to time. "Hey! Ha! Hey ha ha ha!" Little Emma, wielding the dagger, continued practicing under Song Hu's guidance. Her face was fierce, resembling that of an immature female leopard. Phew! Zhao Hongyu breathed a sigh of relief at this. He finally understood. He and Wang Shan had misunderstood everything. Song Hu and little Emma weren't as shabby as they'd imagined. Song Hu must be teaching little Emma some fighting techniques. I am such a dirty person that I actually thought that Emma and Song Hu had such a relationship. If I wasn't such a dirty person, how could I have thought of such things? After Zhao Hongyu understood, his face began to heat up slightly and turned red. Yes, he felt very ashamed that he thought so badly of others. Only people with dark hearts would imagine others to be so dark. It seems that he is really not a good person, but a dirty existence. Zhao Hongyu kept scolding himself in his heart. He was ashamed of his thoughts. Wang Shan, it seems that you and I were wrong. Little Emma is with Song Hu, and it seems that she wants to learn fighting skills from him. Zhao Hongyu turned around with a face full of shame, looked at Wang Shan embarrassedly with a red face and whispered to him. Wang Shan had finally understood what was going on, so when he heard Zhao Hongyu's words, he nodded with an embarrassed and ashamed expression, saying, "Yes, it seems I was truly filthy. We actually imagined such a good young man and such an innocent child to be that kind of person. Let's go, don't disturb them," Zhao Hongyu said quietly, backing away and motioning to Wang Shan. The two of them quickly and quietly left the place. After Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan left, Zhao Hongyu said to Wang Shan with a wry smile, "Now I understand why Emma is pestering Song Hu." Wang Shan looked at Zhao Hongyu in confusion, then said, "Oh," and asked, "Why? Isn't it just that the little girl wants to learn martial arts?" "That's what I see. Could there be some other reason?" Zhao Hongyu raised his head slightly, looking through the dense foliage overhead to the blue sky. Then, in a quiet voice, she replied to Wang Shan, "A few days ago, Amy was captured by those British, wasn't she?" Wang Shan nodded silently. Zhao Hongyu continued, "I think the little girl was upset. She felt she was too weak. Plus, Song Hu's performance in that battle was so impressive, so Emma decided to follow him and become stronger." Zhao Hongyu's guess was correct. That was exactly what little Emma was thinking. Whenever she thought of herself at that time, she felt so helpless and weak. Like a groundhog attacked by a coyote, and she hated that feeling. She wanted to become strong, to protect herself and never face such danger again. Once strong, she could also protect her family, her father and mother. It's undeniable that this incident had a profound impact on little Emma. If the black bear hadn't rushed out, Sandori's dagger would have gouged out the little girl's eyes a little later. Every time she closed her eyes, Emma would recall Sandori's sinister expression, and the disdain and sarcasm on Baker's chubby face. Learning some fighting techniques would be helpful. At least you can protect yourself in times of danger. Wang Shan agreed with Emma's plan. "Okay, let's not talk about this anymore." Zhao Hongyu's gossip simmered after learning that Song Hu and Emma hadn't come to unethical love. "Let's go back. Once we get back, we'll make plans to have the Mohicans trade with their tribesmen within the next few days." With that, Zhao Hongyu headed toward the Mohican camp outside the forest. Wang Shan followed closely behind, leaving the gold mine. Things were now on track at the mine. Zhao Hongyu no longer needed to oversee it, so he could move freely. And Zhao Hongyu wasn't worried that the Mohicans would hoard the gold and refuse to trade with him. You have to understand that, apart from Zhao Hongyu, even if the Mohicans found gold, they couldn't trade it with anyone else. In this area, Zhao Hongyu was the only person they could trade with. In other words, Zhao Hongyu had a monopoly on the Mohicans' trading rights. If they didn't trade with Zhao Hongyu, their gold would become like trash. And it was completely useless to the Mohicans. If Zhao Hongyu hadn't promised them that they could trade it for supplies, the Mohicans wouldn't have gone pining for gold. About half an hour later, Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan emerged from the forest and arrived outside the Mohican camp. Outside the Mohican camp, children were laughing and running around, playing and laughing. Some Mohican women, not participating in the gold rush, squatted outside their tents, preparing their own animal hides or deboning and cutting the meat of their men's hunts. The Mohicans now don't all have triangular leather tents anymore. There are also round yurts, which are not found in the Americas. Originally, this yurt served as Zhao Hongyu's home. Zhao Hongyu's decision to live in a yurt was a desperate one. They simply had nowhere else to stay, and living in someone else's tent was unpalatable. So, using the furs they'd exchanged with the Mohicans, they cut down a few logs of wood and built a yurt-style tent to serve as their own. Zhao Hongyu also purchased a number of labor insurance army coats, dismantled them, rearranged the cotton and fabric, and then sewed the yurt's exterior with bison tendon. Compared to the triangular Indian tents, this yurt offered a much larger and more spacious living space, creating a feeling of complete freedom from oppression and boredom. After Zhao Hongyu and his group's yurt was completed, numerous Mohicans flocked to view it. They exclaimed in admiration, expressing great interest in this new home. Atito's father, the old Mohican chief, immediately followed Zhao Hongyu's example and converted his own tent into a yurt. After moving in, Samra was full of praise. Following this example, many other Mohicans followed suit, and yurt-style tents began to appear everywhere in the Mohican tribe. Of course, only those with some skill in the Mohican tribe could afford to build them. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough furs to build them. Therefore, yurts are relatively rare in the Mohican tribe, accounting for only about 20% of households. The remaining Mohican families still live in the traditional triangular tents. Visitors from other tribes who used to frequent the Mohican tribe would be astonished to see the current state of the tribe. The changes in the Mohican tribe are truly remarkable. Beyond the yurts, the Mohicans now all wear labor insurance coats, having completely abandoned their leaky animal skin clothing, which gave the tribe a somewhat unconventional look. Fortunately, it was only March, the beginning of spring. The surrounding tribes had just gotten through the harsh winter and hadn't had time to visit other tribes. Rural markets in China in the 1960s and 1970s were little more than that. Smiling and greeting the busy Mohawk housewives along the way, Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan returned to their settlement. Entering their tent, they settled down. Wang Shan spoke first. "Chief, let's take this opportunity to add more manpower. We've received quite a bit of gold these days. Should you have enough funds on hand?" Since they were planning to instigate the Mohawk to trade with other tribes, they would need to increase their stockpile. With so much goods stored here, there was no guarantee someone wouldn't harbor malicious intentions. Therefore, adding manpower became the most important priority. Although the Mohawks didn't seem to be showing any signs of such a move, it was always better to be cautious. As the saying goes, don't harbor the intention to harm others, but be wary of them. Zhao Hongyu nodded and whispered to himself, "Activate the trading device." Chapter 37 Wang Shan gives advice. The space-time trader, as it were, activated automatically with a single thought from Zhao Hongyu himself. It was a complete breeze. And aside from Zhao Hongyu himself, the three-dimensional holographic image that appeared when the trader was activated was invisible to anyone else. Not even the genetic man could see it, so he didn't have to worry about being discovered. However, Zhao Hongyu needed to concentrate fully when trading with a trader, so he had to find a safe place. Beep, beep. After opening the trader, Zhao Hongyu immediately accessed his stats. Name, Zhao Hongyu. Age, 15. Gender, male. Civilian rank, head of household. Genetic man loyalty is always 1,525. Farmer, next rank is army captain. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Military rank 012. Soldier, next rank is squad leader. Please meet the upgrade requirements. Products produced by the Shansai Umbrella Technology Research Center include matches, wooden bowls and plates, cast iron axes, cast iron kitchen knives, cast iron pots, cast iron daggers, cast iron machetes, penicillin, salt water, fueling pickled mustard tubers, red star erguotao, bulk rice, aged rice, cotton military coats, black-hearted cotton, trousers, black-hearted cotton, leather-covered cotton boots, green canvas messenger bags, and 17th-century matchlock rifles. Adding new products requires a minimum investment of 3 million yuan. After reviewing his stats, Zhao Hongyu pondered. Could it be that the civil affairs rank is only useful for the loyalty of genetic people, and has no other uses? Zhao Hongyu suspected that this space-time trader was definitely not that simple. He therefore believed that this civil affairs rank must have other uses. However, his current rank was too low, so it was completely undisclosed. Retracting his thoughts, Zhao Hongyu examined the products in the Umbrella Research Lab. Alice. After Zhao Hongyu looked at the products, he sighed helplessly. The current supply of goods was truly too limited. If his plan were to be implemented, these goods wouldn't be able to keep up with the planned supply. If his trade invasion plan were to work, he would need to acquire a larger supply of daily necessities. As for medicine and other goods, he wouldn't need so many. Indeed, daily necessities were what Zhao Hongyu valued most. They were needed by everyone, and they were consumed in the highest quantities. If he could control such goods, the Indians would become indispensable. Of course, this presupposed that Zhao Hongyu could change the Indians' lifestyles, getting them to accept and accustom them to these new items. If they became accustomed to these things, feeling they couldn't live without them anymore, then Zhao Hongyu's plan would succeed. Zhao Hongyu had strong confidence that once his plan began to unfold and the Mohicans began to trade with other tribes, the lives of the surrounding Indians would undoubtedly undergo a drastic change. By then, the Indians, accustomed to modern food, would likely refuse to accept being forced to return to their current lifestyles. Zhao Hongyu's lips curled up slightly at the thought. Next, he checked his account. Account name, Zhao Hongyu. Balance, 3,388,960 RMB. Originally, after purchasing and cultivating 12 genetically modified humans, Zhao Hongyu should have had over 2 million RMB left in his account. However, 2 weeks had passed, and while the Mohicans' purchasing power had weakened, trade continued daily, so Zhao Hongyu's income was increasing daily. It was just that compared to the initial boom, the growth was now a bit slower. However, this was already a sign of things to come, and Zhao Hongyu had to consider the situation. Should he cultivate genetically modified humans, or invest in a research institute that provided protection for counterfeiters? Zhao Hongyu seemed to be in a dilemma. Could it really be that he couldn't have his cake and eat it too? Zhao Hongyu sighed deeply inwardly. Wang Shan, sitting next to Zhao Hongyu, noticed the leader's troubled expression. After a moment's reflection, he tentatively asked, "Leader, are you facing any difficulties? If so, why not share your thoughts and discuss it together? It's better than you having to deal with it alone." Compared to the 12 geneticists purchased later, Wang Shan was the most considerate. Even Zhang Tai and Song Hu weren't as satisfying as Wang Shan. Perhaps it was because he was the first one to be bred, but Zhao Hongyu found Wang Shan very satisfying. Unlike the 12 Trojan geneticists who simply followed orders, Wang Shan, Song Hu, and Zhang Tai each had their own unique personalities. Wang Shan, for example, was extremely observant and had begun to reveal the qualities of a loyal lackey, which was why Zhao Hongyu was always very satisfied with him. Zhang Tai, on the other hand, was different from Wang Shan. He wasn't good at flattering anyone, and even when he did, it always backfired. However, this guy also has a strength. He's very skilled in planning and has shown a great talent for management. Song Hu is completely different from Wang Shan and Zhang Tai. He's neither good at management nor at flattering others. However, this guy possesses an innate passion for combat and is a combative type. Furthermore, Song Hu possesses a strong fighting talent. These three genetic individuals always bring Zhao Hongyu considerable surprises. Of course, perhaps due to their youth, their traits haven't yet fully developed. But Zhao Hongyu believes that with the passage of time, their experience, and age, these traits will gradually mature and flourish. Meanwhile, Wang Shan, with his servile nature, used his reading technique to detect something amiss with his boss. True to his characteristic, lackeys need to help his boss solve problems, he quietly asked. Upon hearing this, Zhao Hongyu replied, "I'm a bit confused. My account balance has already exceeded 3 million. I don't know whether it's better to continue breeding genetically modified humans or invest in our copycat research institute. While manpower is important, I think adding more products is also crucial." Zhao Hongyu shared his dilemma with Wang Shan. Think about it. If we invest in a research institute, what if a tractor or some other 21st century mechanical product emerges? How much help would that be to us? Wang Shan listened quietly as Zhao Hongyu explained his thoughts. Besides helping the boss solve problems, a good lackey also had to be a good listener. Currently, Wang Shan was playing that role. However, listening to Zhao Hongyu's explanation, Wang Shan felt that there was some truth to it. If a tractor or some other useful product did emerge, it would be a huge help to them. Although Manhattan Island now belonged to them, they simply didn't have the resources to develop it. It was a wasteland. A tractor or something would make things much easier. At the very least, they could find a way to use it for farming. It was a pity to leave such prime land lying idle. As a farmer's son, a child from the mountains, Wang Shan possessed a deep and unwavering passion for the land. The Manhattan Island of Zhao Hongyu's time was completely different from the Manhattan Island of earlier history. This part of Manhattan Island was entirely a vast plain, boasting extremely fertile soil. A natural fertile land, with just a little development, could bring Zhao Hongyu considerable surprises. However, the Manhattan Island of the original time and space was not such a vast plain. According to Zhao Hongyu's understanding, although he had traveled through time and space to 1620, who knew if it was a parallel universe, outside the timeline? Zhao Hongyu wasn't a researcher on this topic, so he couldn't fathom it. However, since he was already here, he decided to make the best of it. He wasn't going to sweat it out. Now that Zhao Hongyu had mentioned this, Wang Shan naturally thought of the benefits that could be brought to them if it were true. With only 15 of them, including Zhao Hongyu, there were only 16. Reclaiming an area as vast as Manhattan Island was highly unrealistic. However, precisely because they're currently short on manpower, they need to continue breeding genetically modified humans. Wang Shan understood Zhao Hongyu's dilemma. Alice, it really is like that. Wang Shan sighed inwardly. However, he quickly weighed the options, realizing that even if they invested in a knockoff Umbrella Corporation Research Institute right now, it wouldn't be of much use to them. The products they already had were more than enough for the Mohicans to trade with the surrounding areas. Therefore, investing in a research institute to develop new products wasn't necessary for the time being. The Indians' current enthusiasm for these products would likely last for a while, and it wouldn't fade anytime soon. You know, Even if we develop other products, like eggs or milk, or even buy more cattle, chickens, ducks, or fish, there would still be a lot of benefits for us, Zhao Hongai rambled on, almost possessed, as he kept expounding on the potential benefits of investing in a research institute. His face even shone with a familiar glow. Zhao Hongai grew increasingly excited as he spoke. He imagined the research institute he'd invested in developing spacecraft. He imagined himself leading a vast army of spacecraft and genetically engineered warriors, beginning his cosmic domination from Earth like a swarm of locusts. Of course, all this was just Zhao Hongai's fantasy. He didn't even consider the question, even if they developed a spacecraft, could he afford it? Chapter 38, Unexpected Event. After careful consideration, Wang Shan finally interrupted Zhao Hongai's daydreaming. Chief, I think we should increase our manpower, Wang Shan suggested gravely. Indeed, according to Wang Shan's thinking and considering their current situation, investing in a research institute is irrational. After all, even if they develop new products, it won't do much for their safety. 16 people, surrounded by so many Indian tribes, means the security factor is extremely low. Even if the Mohawk tribe has a good relationship with them now, who can guarantee that it will remain so in the future? Indians are human too, with emotions and desires. Humans have all sorts of desires, even if they are indigenous. Zhao Hongai and his team now possess goods that the Indians don't, which is quite remarkable. With so much merchandise, anything could happen. Wang Shan couldn't guarantee that no one in the Mohawk tribe would covet their goods, or that there wouldn't be murder or robbery. When faced with temptation, whether civilized or indigenous, everyone is the same. Compared to civilized people in a materialistic society, indigenous people are more naive, so it might take them longer to develop such thoughts. Therefore, the safest way to protect them is to increase their manpower and ensure their group has sufficient combat effectiveness. If such an event were to occur in the future, they wouldn't be caught off guard by a lack of manpower. And with sufficient manpower, even if someone were to spy on them and try to take advantage, they would have to think carefully. Zhao Hongai, interrupted from his daydreaming, snapped back to his senses. He looked at Wang Shan seriously, his eyes full of inquiry. Oh, tell me why you have such thoughts? Don't worry, I'll humbly accept good advice, Zhao Hongai spoke sincerely and wholeheartedly. He wasn't a fool, he wouldn't refuse good advice. After all, he understood the principle that one person's shortcomings can benefit two others. It's not impossible for one person to have the final say, but at this stage, Zhao Hongai would be a fool. And while Wang Shan may have a tendency to be a lackey, his advice is often sound, which is what Zhao Hongai values most. It's clear that Wang Shan possesses the highest intelligence among these genetically modified humans. I remember the founder of the Red Dynasty once said something well, strength in numbers, I deeply agree with that. As long as we have people, we have everything. But without people, even if you, the leader, have high-tech weapons, I don't think you'll have enough manpower to use them. Wang Shan uttered something that stunned Zhao Hongai. Oh my god. Even the Red Dynasty's founder knows about this. Genetic human breeding is truly amazing. Zhao Hongai's eyes widened, his expression as if he had seen a ghost. However, Zhao Hongai also internally admitted that Wang Shan's words made a lot of sense. If he had weapons like tanks but didn't have genetically modified humans, they would be nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. He had to admit, Zhao Hongai was moved by Wang Shan's words. After all, Wang Shan's arguments were well-founded and logically coherent. Ignoring the stunned Zhao Hongai, Wang Shan continued, we need to befriend the Mohicans, but we also have to be on guard. If we don't increase our manpower, there's no guarantee some with ulterior motives won't appear. After a pause, Wang Shan swallowed and continued, everything seems to be going smoothly now, but beneath this seemingly calm surface, there are significant risks. Zhao Hongai nodded silently, indicating his full agreement with Wang Shan's words. Looking at Zhao Hongai, who sat before him and nodded silently, Wang Shan said seriously, the Mohicans are still protecting and friendly towards us. This is mainly because we have made great efforts, and everything you have done, Chief, has earned their favor. Also, your earlier deception about us having a tribe behind us is a concern for them. Wang Shan analyzed the situation for Zhao Hongai point by point. Since you're deceiving them, Chief, and we have a large tribe behind us, we need to increase our manpower to keep the pressure on the Mohican leadership. Wang Shan had already formed his own opinion on this matter. He simply brought it out now, but even if he didn't say it now, he would have reminded Chief Zhao Hongai sooner or later. I admit that the Mohicans are simple-minded and not wicked or evil. But we must look at everything from two perspectives, because they are human, and human beings have desires. The more Wang Shan spoke, the more Zhao Hongyu seemed to understand his point, and gradually he came to his senses. Okay, in that case, I won't invest in the Shanzhai Umbrella Research Institute for the time being. We're short on manpower right now, so I'll use the money to add a few more geneticists. Having been persuaded by Wang Shan, Zhao Hongyu wasn't the type to hesitate. He activated the geneticist training function, opened the preset template, and began cultivating the geneticists. Due to limited funds, Zhao Hongyu could only purchase 7 geneticists to start with. After all, even the cheapest gene human cost 442,200 yuan to purchase and cultivate. Zhao Hongyu's current account balance was only 3,388,960 yuan, RMB, so he could only purchase 7. He couldn't spend all his cash, he needed to keep some for future purchases. After completing everything, Zhao Hongyu patiently waited. However, this time, unlike the last time, an unexpected situation occurred. It caught Zhao Hongyu off guard, completely unprepared. With a template set up, gene human cultivation should have been straightforward, with no prompts appearing. Thanks to the settings, the system automatically deducted the cost of cultivating the gene human, eliminating Zhao Hongyu's need for any further manipulation. But this time, something was different. Once again, an abstract animated image appeared before Zhao Hongyu's eyes. The animation zoomed in, revealing a peaceful and tranquil mountain village. It looked as if it were still early morning, with the villagers still asleep. The ink and wash and abstract-style animations lent the scene an eerie beauty. What's going on? After I set up the template, shouldn't this time-consuming animation appear? Zhao Hongyu was startled and began to ponder. However, this was his first time facing such a situation, so he wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Unprepared for such a situation, and especially since he had discovered something amiss with the genetic incubator within the trading system, all Zhao Hongyu could do now was wait quietly. As time passed, the scene slowly zoomed in on the village, motionless. The typical southern Chinese-style houses lined the road, and white smoke gradually rose from each chimney. Zhao Hongyu felt a little puzzled, as the system certainly wasn't just showing him how to cook breakfast. Since the template had been broken, there had to be a reason and purpose. Sure enough, within 30 seconds of this thought forming in Zhao Hongyu's mind, the entire screen began to tremble. At first, the shaking wasn't intense, but it gradually grew more intense. What's going on? Zhao Hongyu exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, a notification window popped up in front of him. Genetically engineered human breeding failed, the village was hit by an earthquake, but the people were spared. When Zhao Hongyu read the text within the notification window, a herd of Central American sheep suddenly rushed through his heart. This is unacceptable. How could there be an earthquake? This isn't the kind of scam you'd expect. Could there be tsunamis, mudslides, or even fires in the future? Zhao Hongyu's facial muscles contorted with excitement. He had never imagined that something like this would happen. The genetically engineered human was gone, and along with it, his investment. Zhao Hongyu felt like a con man. He felt deeply distressed and couldn't accept this. But no matter how upset he was, no matter how much he couldn't accept it, there was nothing he could do. It had already happened, and the space-time trader wouldn't care about his rants. A refund was out of the question, forget it. Zhao Hongyu leaped to his feet, lashing out incessantly. Since he was the only one who could see the space-time trader's display, it looked to outsiders like Zhao Hongyu had gone mad, hurling curses into the air. Although Wang Shan couldn't see the space-time trader's 3D hologram, he knew his leader must have encountered something, and it must have been something deeply troubling. Otherwise, he wouldn't have reacted so violently. Swindler. Bastard. Trash. What a ripoff. Leader, please calm down. What the hell is going on? Wang Shan, seeing his leader so agitated, quickly stood up and rushed over, hugging the now throbbing Zhao Hongyu and demanding. Zhao Hongyu turned around with a sad face, looked at him with an extremely ugly expression and replied, I was cheated by this time-space trading device. All the money I spent on cultivating genetic humans has now been wasted. I have nothing left. What? There is actually such a thing. Even Wang Shan was stunned. Chapter 39 Inquiry. Under Wang Shan's questioning, Zhao Hongyu recounted everything he had experienced, including how the space-time trader had tricked him. Seeing the resentful look on his leader's face, Wang Shan felt uneasy. "Leader, how could this space-time trader be like this? I think there's definitely something fishy about it, we just don't quite understand it yet," Wang Shan said to Zhao Hongyu. "I don't care what's fishy about it. It can't cheat me out of my money. Damn it, that bear. It's so shameless," Zhao Hongyu cursed indignantly. Wang Shan gave a wry smile, shrugged, and said helplessly, "Leader, even if you can't bear it, what else can you do? Is it possible to get a refund for this space-time trader?" Zhao Hongyu was stunned by Wang Shan's words. Then he said awkwardly, "A refund? That's definitely unrealistic. This stingy system won't refund you. That's why I'm so angry." Zhao Hongyu's heart ached at the thought of all the money he'd worked so hard to save, quietly gone. Even though he now had a gold mine and would soon have a large income, he still couldn't understand why his money had been ripped off like that. "Captain, since the system can't refund you, getting angry won't help. What if you get sick from being angry? You're our backbone," Wang Shan consoled Zhao Hongyu, his face sincere yet worried. Zhao Hongyu glanced at Wang Shan's worried expression, took a deep breath, and tried to calm himself. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. You're right. At this point, there's no point in me yelling and cursing. Let me see what's going on." Zhao Hongyu had always wanted to understand the strangeness of the space-time trader. Now that something like this had happened, if he didn't figure it out, he'd be a complete idiot. He didn't want to be screwed again the next time he activated the space-time trader. If he kept getting screwed like this, what was the point of even talking about development? "Wang Shan, go outside and take a look. Don't let anyone disturb me. I need to figure out what this system is all about. If I don't figure it out, I can't stand the constant harassment. We don't have the money to mess with this space-time trader right now." Zhao Hongyu gritted his teeth as he spoke. The thought of being screwed once made his heart cramp. "Okay, Chief," Wang Shan nodded, knowing this matter was crucial for their group. As Zhao Hongyu had said, if they didn't figure out this screw-up, they might encounter it again and again. Even though they had a gold mine under their belt, no matter how much they earned, they couldn't withstand being screwed like this. Even if you have astronomical amounts in your account, a few earthquakes or tsunamis will wipe it all out. "Stop anyone who comes looking for me. You'll stay outside until I figure this out," Zhao Hongyu instructed Wang Shan sternly. After giving his orders, Wang Shan turned, lifted the curtain, and walked out. Zhao Hongyu, on the other hand, sat down on a seat made of animal fur, twisting his body to make himself more comfortable. "Can you tell me what's going on?" Zhao Hongyu tentatively questioned the space-time trader in his mind. He wasn't sure if this would work, as the space-time trader had never been able to answer his questions before. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu wasn't sure he could easily get the system's response and the answer he wanted. Of course, Zhao Hongyu couldn't actually shout in the account. Anyone outside would think he was crazy. Furthermore, the system couldn't hear him. So, Zhao Hongyu could only try to communicate with his space-time trader through his consciousness. Perhaps this would be of some use. "I hope you can tell me what's going on, why the earthquake happened," Zhao Hongyu asked once. The space-time trader didn't respond, which left him somewhat discouraged. However, he pulled himself together and continued communicating with the trader through his consciousness. There was no other way. He had to successfully communicate with the trader. Only then could he get an answer from it, knowing what was happening inside. Only by understanding these things and getting the answers would he have a clear plan. In the future, he could avoid repeating such mistakes and suffering even greater losses. The three-dimensional holographic animation before Zhao Hongyu, visible only to him, was still frozen at the moment of the earthquake. The ink painting and abstract animation style still seemed eerie. In the image, the once peaceful mountain village was now crumbling with houses. Meanwhile, several roads visible in the image showed cracks, even revealing deep black holes. Beep, beep, beep. Zhao Hongyu questioned the system 5 or 6 times with his consciousness, and just when he thought the system was completely unable to communicate, a dialog box suddenly appeared in front of the frozen animation screen. Within this dialog box, a message appeared: "This system has a chance to trigger various disasters. The lower the civil administration level, the higher the chance." Shit. When Zhao Hongyu saw the message in the dialog box, 3 black lines flashed across his forehead. Am I kidding? This kind of thing can happen in the space-time trading system? Isn't this restricting my development? Bullshit. Zhao Hongyu pondered for a moment. The triggering of this natural disaster was simply setting obstacles for himself. It had placed obstacles on his previously smooth path. This made Zhao Hongyu feel deeply uncomfortable. However, Zhao Hongyu hadn't considered that if this setting an obstacle hadn't been set up, if he had truly continued to develop smoothly, perhaps within 2 years he would have truly unified Earth and rushed into space. In this moment of annoyance, Zhao Hongyu clearly hadn't considered this issue. Of course, judging by the space-time trader's settings, it was clear that it didn't want Zhao Hongyu's rise to prominence so easily. After all, no one values things that come too easily. But Zhao Hongyu soon found his composure. He narrowed his eyes at the dialog box, rereading the text several times. Civilian rank? The only thing that surprised Zhao Hongyu about this text was the mention of the civil rank. Actually, Zhao Hongyu didn't see much of a role for the civil rank yet. Currently, the only noticeable benefit was the increased loyalty. However, this increased loyalty wasn't as significant as he'd imagined. Zhao Hongyu was already at the second level of the civil rank, but his loyalty had only increased by 1 point. Even if he reached the third level, his loyalty to the geneticists would only increase by 1 point, a rather useless benefit. At the time, Zhao Hongyu had been wondering if the civil rank wouldn't be of much use. But today, Zhao Hongyu realized how wrong he'd been. Since the space-time trader has such a function, it must have its uses. No matter what function it has, the space-time trader won't use it recklessly. Isn't it true that one's civil affairs rank is related to the probability of a disaster? I'd like to ask, at my current rank, what's the probability of a disaster? Zhao Hongyu patiently continued communicating with the space-time trader through his consciousness. After asking this question, he paused and immediately asked another, also, why didn't I encounter this situation the first 2 times I bred genetic humans? Beep, beep. After Zhao Hongyu finished his questions, he sat there in silence, waiting for the space-time trader's response. After receiving Zhao Hongyu's questions, the space-time trader closed the dialog box and began to beep. It seemed to be constantly operating, thinking about how to respond to Zhao Hongyu's question. Not long after, about a minute later, a new dialog box appeared. Based on your rank evaluation, the following answer is given. The probability of a disaster occurring is 90%, which is extremely high. To reduce the chance of disasters, please work hard to upgrade your civil affairs rank. Also, with higher civil affairs rank, new features and benefits will become available. Go for it, young man. After giving this answer, the dialog box ended with the words, "Go for it, young man." Zhao Hongyu's mouth twitched, and he truly felt like kneeling down to the space-time trader. A 90% chance of disasters? What a ridiculous probability. Zhao Hongyu couldn't even imagine how much money he'd have to pay for a single success. That didn't make sense. If there was a 90% chance of disasters, then why hadn't he encountered something like this the first 2 times? Suddenly, Zhao Hongyu thought of this question, because it seemed completely unreasonable to him. A 90% chance of disasters was already very high. It was impossible for him to be so lucky as to not encounter such a thing twice. There had to be something behind this. Furthermore, he had just asked this question, and the space-time trader hadn't yet given him an answer. Thinking of this, Zhao Hongyu used his consciousness to communicate with the space-time trader. I haven't received an answer to the second question I asked just now. Beep. When Zhao Hongyu withdrew his thoughts, the 3-dimensional holographic image appeared in the dialog box again. Chapter 40 I Won't Give Up. During the first and second genetic human cultivation, the user was still within the protection period. Therefore, the disaster probability wasn't triggered. However, now that the protection period has expired, you can no longer enjoy the protection. At this point, Zhao Hongyu finally understood why the system hadn't triggered this ridiculous disaster reason the first 2 times he cultivated genetic humans. Bullshit, this feels a bit like playing a game, with a novice protection period. Zhao Hongyu mentally complained. Could you please stop constantly displaying dialog boxes? If possible, could you please chat with me? This is so inconvenient. I remember there was a chat function back then. Why isn't it there now? The other party's dialog box was so slow, Zhao Hongyu couldn't stand it anymore and asked, yes, if the space-time trader system had a function to communicate with me using voice like a human, it would be much more convenient. Beep, beep. After almost a minute, the system finally displayed another dialog box. The user's civil affairs level is too low to access advanced features. Please work hard to raise your level. The system has many features, please explore them on your own. The initial dialog function is intended to help users quickly master the trading tool. After the beginner period expires, this function will be disabled. This dialog box and the text within it appeared before Zhao Hongyu. After about 5 minutes, the text disappeared, and the dialog box retracted. After reading the system's response, Zhao Hongyu had a preliminary idea. Judging from the system's response, raising the civil affairs level seemed to offer more than just a bonus to loyalty. There might be other unexpected benefits, which made Zhao Hongyu's heart flutter. However, Zhao Hongyu immediately remembered his dilemma. He was no longer within the protection period, so the 90% chance of triggering a disaster was a huge challenge for him. My rapid rise to prominence isn't that simple, Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself, rising from his seat. Now that he knew the reason and couldn't change anything, Zhao Hongyu could only accept this fact. Yes, he could only rely on the space-time trading system now, there was no way he could leave it. Therefore, even with the trading system's rather cumbersome settings, Zhao Hongyu still had to deal with it. If he didn't deal with this space-time trader, the American products and gold Zhao Hongyu had collected would become useless. Yes, gold could bring huge profits, but if it couldn't be sold for money to buy the things you needed, it was really no different from stone. It was inedible and couldn't keep you warm. Zhao Hongyu raised many more questions, but each one was rejected by the space-time trader, citing insufficient authority. Finally, with no other options left, Zhao Hongyu could only curse and leave his tent. Chief, have you figured everything out? As Zhao Hongyu lifted the curtain and exited the tent, Wang Shan, who had been waiting outside, quickly approached and asked with concern. Wang Shan was deeply concerned about his leader's development. Unlike the carefree Song Hu and Zhang Tai, Wang Shan was well aware that if their small group wanted to thrive, it depended on their leader and the space-time trader. If the trader malfunctioned, or if their leader suffered a health problem, the fate of these geneticists would be dire. Taking a deep breath, Zhao Hongyu looked up at the sky, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the early spring sunshine. After a moment, he lowered his head again to look at Wang Shan. Wang Shan's face was filled with concern, his eyes filled with inquiry. I figured it all out. Unfortunately, I'm in trouble. Zhao Hongyu shook his head with a troubled expression. It wasn't wrong to say he was in serious trouble. After all, there was a 90% chance of a natural disaster when cultivating geneticists. If a geneticist's premature death wasn't a problem, then what would truly be considered a problem? What the hell is going on? Wang Shan saw resentment, helplessness, and confusion on Zhao Hongyu's face, which puzzled him. Wang Shan wondered what had happened to his leader to cause him to be so depressed. These questions echoed in Wang Shan's mind. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Did you know? This piece of shitty time-space trading machine has actually added a setting to the gene-human breeding function. From now on, every time I breed a gene-human, there's a 90% chance of a disaster, causing my breeding to fail. What? A 90% chance of natural or man-made disasters. Even Wang Shan was stunned by Zhao Hongyu's words. The probability was truly too high. It seemed like this would happen almost every time the breeding function was activated. Could it be that the system was reacting this way precisely because their leader possessed this incredible golden finger? Wang Shan felt that his speculation was very likely. Zhao Hongyu had no idea what Wang Shan was thinking at the moment. He smiled wryly and said to Wang Shan, "Prepare for a miserable day. We can't do anything about the settings of the time trader right now. All I can do now is pray that I'm not so unlucky and that my luck improves." Indeed, thinking about it now wouldn't solve anything. They couldn't possibly change the settings of the time trader, they didn't have the ability to do so. Chief, this time trader is truly a ripoff, Wang Shan sighed, nodding in agreement. Zhao Hongyu rubbed his face with his hands, then cheered himself up and said, "There's no point in overthinking. Let's just take it one step at a time. Hopefully, we can get through this difficult time." Chief, how much cash is left in your account now? Wang Shan asked. Because of the money lost this time, Zhao Hongyu had suffered a huge loss. As Zhao Hongyu's most trusted lackey, Wang Shan felt it would be best for him to gain as much knowledge as possible about the chief's situation. Only then could he offer some advice. We still have over 400,000 in cash left, and it's impossible to breed a single genetic person. I can't afford to touch this money carelessly. I need to save some for purchasing goods. Wang Shan nodded, a clear mind. Come on, let's go to Manhattan Island. I'm in a terrible mood right now. Let's go and relax and change my mind. After this emotional blow, Zhao Hongayu's mood was extremely bad. He had no interest in anything, and nothing interested him. Wang Shan nodded in agreement. The two of them then left the Mohawk camp. It was only noon when they left the Mohawk camp. After walking for a while, Wang Shan said to the depressed Zhao Hongayu, "Chief, the American continent is full of treasures, so we don't have to worry about a shortage of funds. Besides, the gold mine is doing well and is now on the right track. I think we can make up for the money we lost this time in a few days." To cheer Zhao Hongayu up, Wang Shan tried his best to say nice things. But Wang Shan's words made perfect sense, and Zhao Hongayu had to admit it. Indeed, as Wang Shan had said, the American continent was teeming with treasures. Timber, wild animal furs, all sorts of rare and exotic animals, and all sorts of minerals. Even the fish in the ocean were a rich source of income. However, given Zhao Hongayu's current situation, he couldn't get the timber because he didn't have the tools to cut it. Using only a metal axe, felling trees was a daunting task. And the fish in the ocean were even more out of reach for Zhao Hongayu. The reason was simple: he didn't have a boat. Without a boat, fishing was impossible. And the Mohawk canoes could only operate close to the coastline, preventing them from entering areas where fish were present. As for the various mineral deposits in the Americas, Zhao Hongayu had no way of mining them at the moment. First, he lacked the necessary technology and machinery. After all, his fake technology research institute hadn't yet developed them. Fortunately, Zhao Hongayu could still get his hands on the animal and for resources. Otherwise, Zhao Hongayu would be on the verge of tears. He'd been ripped off too hard this time. Meanwhile, the previously discovered gold vein was also gaining momentum. However, Zhao Hongayu hadn't yet begun acquiring the gold, and the Mohawk women panning for gold were hoarding their finds, not rushing to exchange them for goods. It was foreseeable that once the gold could be exchanged, Zhao Hongayu would have accumulated a substantial amount of money. With that much money, Zhao Hongayu could once again cultivate genetically modified humans. Of course, as long as he didn't mind that awful 90% disaster rate, that would be enough. In a canoe, Wang Shan and Zhao Hongayu set foot on Manhattan Island, the island that now belonged to them. "I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how much money it would take to expand our business," Zhao Hongayu sighed, grudgingly addressing Wang Shan, who had parked the canoe and was following behind him. "As long as there's a glimmer of hope, we can give it a try. Besides, what we're doing is simply business, so don't worry too much, Chief," Wang Shan said to Zhao Hongayu with a smile. Zhao Hongayu kicked a stone away and nodded. "I won't give up. Now that I've arrived in this era, I will rise to the top of the world." Chapter 41. The future is full of hope. Wow. Wow. Walking along the beach, smelling the salty, fishy sea breeze, Zhao Hongayu and Wang Shan strolled leisurely along the shore. Manhattan Island's southern beach is a natural, healthy harbor. In the 21st century, this area was developed into a vast seaport. The spot where Zhao Hongayu and Wang Shan were strolling now was the future side of the harbor, the southern tip of Manhattan Island. However, unlike the future, the southern tip of Manhattan Island at this time was still pristine, untouched by industrialization and pollution. Several sea snails were tossed onto the beach by the waves. When the waves receded, a few tiny hermit crabs dug their burrows from the soft sand and emerged to the surface, searching for food. The scenery here is truly beautiful. We won't see anything like it in the future, Zhao Hongayu said softly, pausing. Behind him, Wang Shan, gazing at the azure sea, also wore a mesmerized expression. Yes, the scenery is truly beautiful. It's rare to see such scenery in the industrialized cities of the future, not even on Hainan Island. There are too many people there. Wang Shan, the genetically engineered human, even knew Hainan Island. Once I'm strong enough, I'll build a port here. At the very least, a shipyard to produce our own ships, Zhao Hongayu said, raising his right hand and pointing to a rocky hilltop on the distant beach. Master, the southern part of Manhattan Island is still a long way from the sea. I've seen future world maps, and if you ask me, the eastern coast of Long Island would be a good place to build a port. Wang Shan followed Zhao Hongayu and engaged in a casual conversation about the subject. Zhao Hongayu had finally recovered from the blow he suffered from the space-time trader, and Wang Shan didn't want his leader to dwell on this sad past again. So, Once Zhao Hongyu had picked up a new topic, he immediately followed suit. Hey! Why are we talking about this? It's a bit early to discuss this. Look at what I have now besides you 15 men and some goods, Zhao Hongyu sneered self-deprecatingly, spreading his hands and addressing Wang Shan. Bullshit, I have nothing else besides these, Chief. As long as we are led by you, we will definitely prosper in the future. Please don't lose heart, you must have confidence in yourself, Wang Shan responded quickly. As Wang Shan, he was deeply worried about his leader becoming depressed. After all, their future depended on their leader. If the leader did well, they, the genetic people, would also enjoy good fortune. If Zhao Hongyu were to fail, then they, the genetic people, would be left with nothing. Hearing this, Zhao Hongyu turned to look at Wang Shan, who looked at him with a look of confusion, and said, Wang Shan, you don't think I'm the kind of person who would easily become depressed, do you? Why do I feel like I'm a loser from all your words of comfort? Without waiting for Wang Shan to reply, Zhao Hongyu changed the subject and said to himself with a somewhat self-deprecating tone, I can't blame you for thinking that. I've really been a loser lately. After hearing Zhao Hongyu's self-deprecating remarks, Wang Shan opened his mouth and didn't know how to comfort the leader. As for Zhao Hongyu, after he finished speaking, the decadent look on his face was swept away, and his face was filled with a very sunny compatibility, which made people feel happy. I feel much better now. I'm just a mortal. I can't be perfect. I'll always do some stupid things or think things through. Maybe I'm setting too high a bar for myself, always wanting everything to be flawless, but how is that even possible? Zhao Hongyu had finally come to a realization, and now he felt much better. When Wang Shan heard his leader say this, he immediately understood that he had recovered. So, Wang Shan smiled and said to Zhao Hongyu, Leader, you're right to think of this. Whether it's you or us, we're all redressed beyond repair. Humans have emotions and desires, and we make mistakes. Life's journey isn't about luck or luck. We'll just deal with difficulties. Once we overcome that mountain of difficulty, the road ahead will be smooth. Just then, another sea breeze blew by. The damp, fishy breeze stirred the coconut trees on the beach. Hey, Wang Shan, look, I've got a reward for you today. Zhao Hongyu smiled as he looked at the coconut leaves rustling in the sea breeze, then ran over. Swish, swish, swish. Standing beneath a coconut tree, Zhao Hongyu spread his hands, spat into them twice, rubbed them together, and began to climb up the trunk. Quickly, Zhao Hongyu reached the treetop and deftly chopped off a few coconuts with a dagger at his waist. Try this. It's my reward for your drink. Zhao Hongyu slid down from the tree, bent down to pick up a fallen coconut on the beach, and walked over. Handing the coconut to Wang Shan, Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself, puzzled, how can there be coconut trees in this place? This isn't a tropical area. Shouldn't coconut trees only grow in the tropics? This is really weird. I can't figure it out. Wang Shan, too, was puzzled. In fact, when Wang Shan first came to Manhattan Island and found this coconut grove, he was a little puzzled. Never mind, we don't need to worry about this problem. Zhao Hongyu said this in a self-questioning and self-answering manner without waiting for Wang Shan to speak. The two of them used the daggers on their waists and began to dig at the coconuts. In a short while, the two of them had opened a hole in the coconuts in their hands. Oh my god. There is no coconut juice in this coconut. My effort was really in vain. When they saw that the coconuts were empty, the two looked at each other and laughed. Chief, it is strange to have coconut trees in this place. But now it seems understandable. Zhao Hongyu nodded continuously, taking Wang Shan's words seriously. He dropped the empty coconut shell, now devoid of juice, onto the ground. Let's go, let's take a walk around Manhattan Island. This is my territory, after all, and I haven't really explored it yet. I'd better get to know what's in store for me. Zhao Hongyu discarded the coconut and turned to walk inland, waving at Wang Shan. Wang Shan chuckled, dropped his coconut, and quickly followed. The Manhattan Island of this era was indeed different from the Manhattan Zhao Hongyu knew in the future. The vast plains, the tender grass just emerging from the surface in early spring, and the adorable groundhogs poking their heads out of their burrows all marked its difference. Historically, Manhattan Island wasn't a plain, it was dotted with hills. However, the Americans' development eventually transformed Manhattan Island. However, these things didn't matter to Zhao Hongyu, and he didn't care at all. He felt that this Manhattan Island, entirely plain, was even more satisfying. Well, there aren't many wild animals on the island, mostly small ones like marmots and rabbits, but no large, ferocious carnivorous beasts. Zhao Hongyu bent down, reached out, and scooped up a handful of soil. The land here is very fertile, and if he had the chance in the future, he'd like to make good use of it. Back in Europe, just selling grain can make a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily require high-tech products. We can use this place in the future. We can grow cabbage, potatoes, even corn, soybeans, and wheat. Sprinkling the soil on the ground, Zhao Hongyu rubbed his hands. Then glanced around and said to Wang Shen behind him. Wang Shen nodded. Chief, you're right. If we develop this plain well, it will be a treasure trove of endless wealth. Every resource will eventually be exhausted, whether it's gold or timber, but cultivating the land can bring us endless profits, he continued, following Zhao Hongyu's lead. Even if this land is developed in the future, it's still okay if we don't sell the vegetables and grain we grow to Europe. There are so many Indian tribes nearby, and they can easily consume all our production. Wang Shan paused, thought for a moment, and continued, even if the Indians can consume it, don't you still have the space-time trader, Chief? We can grow vegetables and grain without the use of chemical fertilizers, producing entirely organic food. I think we can definitely fetch a high price. Well, that's a good idea. Wang Shan's words reminded Zhao Hongyu. Indeed, hundreds of thousands of acres of fertile land could be reclaimed from the Manhattan Island plains. If these fields were well tended, the returns would rival those from gold mining. Just as Wang Shan had said, even if they can't sell their grain and vegetables in the future, they can sell them to the space-time trader. Organic food will definitely be a hot commodity in the future. Ha, I think our future is bright, but for now, let's go back, Zhao Hongyu laughed and said, looking at Wang Shan. When you return, inform the Mohicans. We can begin the gold exchange trade now. Zhao Hongyu, after his time on Manhattan Island, was no longer as depressed as before. Yes, Chief. Wang Shan was naturally the happiest person to see his chief recover. Therefore, Wang Shan's voice was quite clear and powerful when he responded to Zhao Hongyu. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, Women with Mohawks. Hey Tong, what can I exchange these stones I've found for? A rather attractive Mohawk woman, about 30 years old, approached Zhao Hongyu's trading point and asked nervously. When Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan returned to the Mohawk yurt, Wang Shan, following Zhao Hongyu's instructions, announced the opening of trade the next morning. Upon hearing the news, the Mohawk women, who had been waiting for the opportunity, flocked to Zhao Hongyu's yurt and began waiting. Although Zhao Hongyu had previously agreed that they could exchange the stones they collected for goods, he was too lazy to exchange them bit by bit. He simply requested that they accumulate their gold and only come back for trading once they reached a certain amount. Therefore, before they had even begun trading, the Mohawk women felt uneasy. Now, Zhao Hongyu had announced that trade was possible. The Mohawk women were certainly unhappy, but they didn't know how the transaction worked, leaving them feeling uneasy. Zhao Hongyu had already handed over full responsibility for this matter to Zhang Tai, a man with a keen interest in business. Following Zhao Hongyu's prearranged terms, Zhang Tai sat in front of the yurt and answered each question. Considering the Indian women had to brave the cold streams of the forest to mine for gold, Zhao Hongyu had to offer a fair price. After all, he wasn't the kind of ruthless person who would base his rise on the blood and bones of the Indians. 200 grams of gold could be exchanged for 3 axes and a 50-jin bag of aged rice from Zhao Hongyu. To the Mohawk women, this price was the most conscientious and fair possible. As expected of the noble black eyes, the fair black eyes. How much would 3 axes cost? A low-quality axe is no longer available in the city. It only sells in some rural markets, but it only fetches 30 or 40 yuan. 3 axes, at most 100 yuan. 50 kilograms of old rice, even at 3 yuan per kilogram, only costs 150 yuan. But what about the price of gold? The price on the space-time trader has soared from 320 yuan to 340 yuan. After all, this price fluctuates with the price of gold in the 21st century. Zhao Hongyu is well aware that the price of gold in some Chinese cities in the 21st century has almost exceeded 400 yuan. Therefore, the price offered by the space-time trader is still very fair. The Indian women who exchanged their panning gold with Zhao Hongyu only received a commodity worth less than a gram of gold. This means that Zhao Hongyu's profit from this transaction is as much as 200 times the original price. What kind of business can have a 200 times profit? Not even drugs and arms can generate such high profits. According to Zhao Hongyu's rules, these Indian women had to collect at least 200 grams of gold before they could trade with him. This meant that Zhao Hongyu would receive at least 200 grams of gold for each trade. However, all he had to pay was a mere 300 yuan worth of products, equivalent to 1 gram of gold. It was truly insane to run such a business. Zhao Hongyu, however, wasn't at all worried about the vein failing to generate profit for these Mohawk gold-digging women. After all, the gold vein had been untapped for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, leaving it exposed and easily accessible. As long as you were diligent and not lazy, you could exchange your gold for goods from Zhao Hongyu and live a life of abundance. In the streams of the vein, and in the cracks in the quartz stone that crisscrossed the rocky walls, golden veins indicated the vein's rich mineral content. Even this surface mining, Zhao Hongyu believed, would take some time. Given time, he might be able to purchase the large machinery from the space-time trader and begin deep mining. Time. For Zhao Hongyu, it was the most precious commodity. Of course, money was also what he needed most. Without it, how could he cultivate genetically modified humans? Without it, how could he invest in his copycat research institutes and produce new products and machinery? Without it, how could he purchase goods and trade with the Mohicans? Zhao Hongyu's future rise, now planned, depended on his ability to maintain continuous trade. This is the gold I mined. Do you think the amount is correct? When the trade began, the first Mohican woman in line untied a small pouch made of marmot skin from her waist. She opened the pouch, turned it over, and poured the gold onto the table in front of Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai and his men didn't have scales, and neither did the Mohicans. So, how could they measure the weight of this gold? Zhao Hongyu and his team had certainly considered this problem in this situation. To cope with this situation and facilitate the transaction, Zhao Hongyu found a stone weighing approximately 200 grams. With the stone, Zhao Hongyu found a wooden stick and made a simple scale. Thus, a measuring scale for trading was created. Zhao Hongyu himself had no idea how heavy the stone was, but a rough estimate would be sufficient. As for whether it was heavier or lighter, there was no way around it. Zhao Hongyu was open-minded. The profit from this trade was definitely sufficient, so a smaller amount wouldn't bother him. Besides, the Mohawk women had a hard time standing in the icy stream panning for gold. If they continue doing this for a long time, they might develop rheumatism or something. This is a lifelong ailment, and Zhao Hongyu felt a certain amount of guilt. After all, Zhao Hongyu wasn't the kind of unscrupulous capitalist who would exploit people. If possible, Zhao Hongyu had even thought about it. As soon as he developed plastic waders or a half-length jacket, he would immediately provide them free of charge to the gold-digging women in the Mohawk region. Only then would his conscience feel better. Zhang Tai gathered the scattered gold nuggets on the table and placed them in a small wooden bowl. The stone opposite the bowl was tilted high, indicating that the gold was more than sufficient. Zhang Tai nodded, then turned and waved to the dull-faced subordinate standing behind him. Give this lady the 3 axes and 50 kilograms of rice. The Gene man, receiving the order, turned and walked into the yurt, quickly retrieving 3 axes and a sack of rice. Upon receiving these items, the Mohawk woman's face lit up with a broad smile, revealing her cheerful mood. Haha, I never thought those stones could actually be exchanged for food. The women behind him began to chatter, seeming amazed. They couldn't understand why Haitong would be so foolish as to need such a stone. However, they didn't care. After all, it was Haitong who was being traded. It wasn't like the Mohicans were forcing him, so if he wanted to trade, then so be it. Everything went smoothly. Zhang Tai took out the gold, checked the weight, and as long as it passed the test, the transaction would go smoothly. The Mohican women were honest and didn't play dirty. I don't want an axe, can I have pickled mustard greens? When it was a Mohican woman's turn, she nervously asked for something else. Of course, not every Mohican family needed an iron axe or rice. Some hoped for pickled mustard greens, or guo tao, Chinese or guo tao, or matches. Zhang Tai smiled and said, no problem at all. We'll trade anything you want. Zhao Hongyu and the others had anticipated this situation and had set a very reasonable price. No matter how they exchanged, it wouldn't exceed the price of 1 gram of gold. You want pickled mustard greens? No problem at all. I'll give you as many packs of pickled mustard greens as you want for 300 yuan. Want matches? No problem, 300 packs for 1 yuan. The man in the family wants erguo tao, Chinese erguo tao? Easy, 20 bottles. Just finding some rocks in the forest and being able to exchange them for so many things has the Mohawk women thrilled. Before Zhao Hongyu arrived, the Mohawk women had little to do, regardless of season. At best, they stayed home to look after the children, their livelihoods scalding the skins and drying the game the men had hunted. But after Zhao Hongyu showed up, they suddenly realized they could contribute to their families, earning enough food to feed the men and children. And that's what made them excited. Most importantly, panning for gold didn't seem difficult or tiring at all. It was like taking a casual stroll through the grasslands and finding discarded animals from other tribes. Tomorrow I'm going to get my sister to go panning for gold. Her kids are big eaters. Just doing this for 3 days will easily earn them 50 kilograms of rice, and they'll never go hungry again. Some women in the crowd started to think up little ideas, ready to drag their families along. Now I can support my family, and I can get enough food to fill my stomach. I can even buy my man's favorite drink, erguo tao. See if he keeps hitting me. If he hits me again, I won't give him any rice. The trade went smoothly, with the Mohawk women each thinking about their own things. Chapter 43. A lot of gold. The trade proceeded smoothly. The Mohican women, beaming with joy after completing their transactions, hurried home, ready to surprise their husbands and children. For a moment, the crowds in front of Zhao Hongyu's trading point, a yurt used exclusively for trade, attracted a large number of Mohicans to stop and watch. The number of women participating in the gold panning was small, only about 100. Most of the Mohican women, despite Black Bear's urging, showed little interest. After all, they were still unsure about the idea of stones being exchanged for goods. To avoid embarrassment, Black Bear mobilized his close confidants to persuade their women to pan for gold, thus preserving their dignity in front of Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu didn't dwell on this initial situation. He considered it perfectly normal. In time, if the women who profited from the initial gold panning proved successful, other women would surely follow. What Zhao Hongyu needed was someone to set an example and create a sensational template for the Mohawks. Now he had succeeded. The Mohawk women who had spent a few days panning for gold in the mines had reaped the fruits of their labor. As they joyfully departed with the rice, preserved mustard, and other goods they had exchanged, the women around them, who hadn't previously participated, looked on with envy and regret. Honestly, panning for gold there, aside from the cold, was effortless. Even a child could do it. It wasn't difficult at all. Some of the women who had gone early to pan for gold brought their children with them, with the mothers panning for gold while the children kept it safe. Of course, the children were always busy, squatting down to pick up any exposed gold in the streams and creeks. This way, the panner's haul was enormous. Among those who trusted Zhao Hongyu the most were the wives of the dozens of Mohawk warriors who had ambushed the British merchant baker. Because their husbands adored Zhao Hongyu, these women, persuaded by their husbands, immediately joined the ranks of the gold miners. Even several widows of fallen soldiers joined in. Arranging these widows to work as gold miners was Zhao Hongyu's original intention. After all, their husbands had died in battle, but their wives, children, and even the elderly still had to make ends meet. Without a man in the family, what could they do? In the age of cold weapons, men were the backbone of the family. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu kindly recruited these widows into the ranks of gold miners, and those widows, deeply grateful for what Zhao Hongyu had done, joined immediately. Now, everything is going just as Zhao Hongyu envisioned. This first group of female gold miners, having received such a generous reward, has already stirred up quite a stir among the others. Zhao Hongyu stood by, chuckling to himself. It won't be long before the ranks of gold miners expand. Wang Sham stood beside Zhao Hongyu, a body height shorter than him. A faint smile crossed his face, but a closer look revealed a cunning undertone beneath his simple exterior. It looks like these women will ask to be miners tonight too. It seems everything is as you expected, Chief, Wang Sham said sincerely after observing them for a moment. Zhao Hongyu didn't show any smugness, but rather a nonchalant expression. That's nothing. If I couldn't even handle the Native Americans from 1620, I'd have lived in vain. Though seemingly nonchalant, Zhao Hongai was actually beaming inside. He just had to keep a facade to avoid appearing to be underestimated. Chief, what did you do before you came to this world? As geneticists, they all knew Zhao Hongai's origins. So, Wang Shan's question was not surprising at all. Zhao Hongai was well aware of this, so he wasn't particularly shocked by the news. Of course, the geneticists knew, but they wouldn't reveal Zhao Hongai's identity. They were subject to significant restrictions on this point. The rules were simple: if a geneticist revealed their user identity to outsiders, they would be forcibly eliminated. As for how? That depended on the space-time trader, and such an issue hadn't arisen yet. It doesn't matter what I did before. Living in this era, it's not very important anymore. Zhao Hongai clearly didn't want to discuss his past life and identity, as it would only make him nostalgic for life in the future. Sensing a hint of resignation in his leader's heart, Wang Shan wisely stopped the subject. Chief, how much gold do you think we can collect today? Wang Shan shifted the conversation to the subject of gold. Zhao Hongai, who had previously maintained a nonchalant demeanor, suddenly had a flicker of light in his eyes when Wang Shan mentioned gold. I'm not entirely sure, but if everyone has 200 gold pieces, I think we'll definitely make a good profit today. After all, 200 grams is almost a pound. Congratulations, Chief, on your great fortune. May your life continue to improve under your leadership, Wang Shan said flatteringly, delighting Zhao Hongai. While a little over 100 people wasn't a large group, it allowed the transaction to continue well into the evening, when the sun had already set behind the Akarachi Mountains, revealing a faint reddish hue. The transaction was finally successfully completed. Inside the Mohican tribe, the women had become sparse, and more men were appearing, returning from hunting. Puffs of white smoke rose from the roofs of both the yurts and the triangular tents. The Mohican housewives were preparing dinner for the evening. Captain, we received a large amount of gold today. Now we have enough money to expand our staff. Zhang Tai ordered his men to carry the tables into the tent behind them, then hurried over to tell Zhao Hongai the good news. Seeing Zhang Tai's delight, Zhao Hongai and Wang Shan were also infected, and their faces were filled with joy. I saw everything. The first transaction went smoothly and there were no problems, Zhao Hongai said to Zhang Tai and Wang Shan with a smile. The Mohicans have accepted the weights and measures we improvised. This way, we have a relatively reliable and stable income, and they have a certain level of purchasing power. I don't have to worry about their purchasing power declining anymore. Captain, let's calculate how much gold we collected today, Wang Shan suggested. Zhang Tai chimed in, yes. Quickly calculate how much gold we've collected. Oh my goodness. I've never seen so much gold in my life. My mouth is watering. Compared to the belligerent Song Hu and the doggedly servile Wang Shan, Zhang Tai clearly had a keen interest in business. This was especially true during the trade with the Mohicans, where Zhang Tai volunteered to handle the transaction. Seeing Zhang Tai rubbing his hands together, his money-obsessed expression, Zhao Hongai and Wang Shan both laughed. Actually, there's no need to calculate how much gold we have. The space-time trader will automatically calculate it once we sell it. What I care about is how much goods and supplies we've traded today. Zhao Hongai raised his leg and, at Zhang Tai's signal, headed towards the yurt built specifically for trade. Technically, this yurt was Zhao Hongai's store within the Mohican camp. If he grew stronger, the yurt would undoubtedly expand, and it wasn't impossible for it to become a massive supermarket. Zhao Hongai hadn't considered building his own shelter within the Mohawk tribe. He was living in the Mohawk camp out of necessity. As soon as Zhao Hongai gained the strength, he would reach Manhattan Island, for that was the place he valued most. Who would still live in a yurt then? At least it'd be brick houses. Entering the yurt, which served as a store, everyone sat down on the ground. The floor inside was covered with a thick layer of buffalo hide, so there was no need to worry about resting their butts. Zhang Tai waved his hand, instructing his genitaler to carry in the leather bag containing the gold, and then sent them out to guard the gate. Zhang Tai personally opened the buffalo hide bag in front of Zhao Hongai. With a clatter. After opening the bag, Zhang Tai gently lifted it, and the scattered gold within poured out. For a moment, the entire tent shimmered with a dazzling golden light. Gold. It was indeed something that made people's hearts beat faster. No wonder some people were willing to start a war for it, and some were willing to kill for it. Looking at the scattered gold in front of him, Zhao Hongayu's breathing became rapid. It must be said that although gold cannot be eaten or drunk, it has a great temptation to people. Especially for people like Zhao Hongyu who have lived in a materialistic society. Wang Shan stuck out his tongue and licked his dry lips. How much money does this cost? If it were in my hometown, it would be enough to marry more than a dozen wives. Chapter 44 Hidden Dangers and Price Fluctuations. A visual inspection revealed a considerable amount of gold on the ground. While it was scattered gold grains, it was still a thick layer, forming a seemingly unrelated hill. Our weights and measures aren't very accurate, so we can't expect those Mohawk women to actually bring in 200 grams of gold. There's going to be a lot of discrepancy, but I estimate that even if there is, we'll still make a lot of money. Wang Shan raised his right hand, stroked his chin, and said. Zhao Hongyu nodded. It can't be helped. We don't have a scale. However, Zhao Hongyu smiled and said to Wang Shan and Zhang Tai, Wang Shan is right. Even if there is discrepancy, we'll still make a profit. Zhang Tai, how much did we spend? Zhang Tai nodded and briskly reported the quantity of goods traded that afternoon. Over 6,000 kilograms of aged rice, purchased at 15 yuan per kilogram, for a total of 9,000 RMB. 130 iron axes, purchased at 30 yuan each, totaling 3,900 yuan. 40 medium-sized iron pots, purchased at 200 yuan each, totaling 8,000 yuan. 60 boxes of fueling pickled mustard greens, small packages of 1,000 each, purchased at 500 yuan each, totaling 30,000 yuan. Matches, erguo tao, 2-pot liquor, wooden bowls and plates, all traded. However, compared to the iron goods, rice, and pickled mustard greens, the volume seemed rather small. All these goods combined only used up less than 100,000 yuan in Zhao Hongayu's account balance. After listening to Zhang Tai's account report, Zhao Hongyu laughed. Ho ha, less than 100,000 yuan, and so much gold. This deal is a lucrative one. Wang Shan and Zhang Tai both laughed along. Yes, Zhao Hongyu was absolutely right. This business was truly lucrative, even ridiculously so. What could one do with 100,000 yuan? If converted into gold, at the 21st century gold price of 340 yuan per gram, this would only buy 294 grams of gold. But the gold scattered on the ground before Zhao Hongyu now weighed far more than 294 grams, dozens of times more. Zhao Hongyu raised his hand and rubbed the ruby ring on his left middle finger. He used his consciousness to communicate with his space-time trader, activating the trading function. In less than a second, the gold that had been scattered before him vanished, all absorbed by the space-time trader using a mysterious force. Wang Shan and Zhang Tai weren't particularly shocked, as they knew their leader possessed such a miraculous space-time trader. A beep. Silence fell within the tent. Wang Shan and Zhang Tai watched Zhao Hongyu silently, not daring to disturb him, fearing it would disrupt his transaction. After receiving Zhao Hongyu's gold, the space-time trader began rapidly calculating its weight. The user sent 18,532 grams of gold and asked you if you wanted to trade or store it. The space-time trader quickly calculated the weight of the gold and told Zhao Hongyu. Zhao Hongyu frowned slightly after hearing the data reported by the space-time trader. This weight was quite different from what he had expected. Considering there were 120 Mohawk women working at the gold mine, and according to their rule of 200 grams per trade, he should have received 24,000 grams. Even if there was a discrepancy of around 4,000 pieces would have been enough. However, this time, the discrepancy was about 6 kilograms, which was quite a bit. However, Zhao Hongyu soon felt relieved. He had no weights and measures, so he had just picked up a random stone as a standard. Perhaps the discrepancy was just a bit large. After figuring this out, Zhao Hongyu's frown softened. Sell, he communicated with his space-time trader with his mind. He wouldn't store it. Besides, there was no point in storing it. For Zhao Hongyu right now, what he needed most was cash and the investment to buy the genetically modified human. Okay, start trading mode. According to Zhao Hongyu's request, the trader disabled the storage function and enabled the item selling function. Ding dong. Today's gold purchase price is 330 yuan per gram. The user is asked if they want to continue selling. Oh wow, today's price seems to have dropped by 10 yuan compared to yesterday. Zhao Hongyu was stunned by the gold price displayed by the space-time trader. Yesterday's gold price was 340 yuan per gram, and today it's 330 yuan per gram. It seems the price of the space-time trader fluctuates. But that's not so bad. The fluctuation is not that big, only 10 yuan. Zhao Hongyu can still accept this price. Even so, Zhao Hongyu has lost over 100,000 yuan in income. Okay, according to the user's request, the item 18,532 grams of gold is now for sale at 330 yuan per gram. After confirming that Zhao Hongyu was indeed going to sell the gold, the space-time trader began to work. About 10 seconds later, it displayed another prompt. 18,532 grams of gold sold successfully, totaling RMB 6,115,560. Please check your account. Just as Zhao Hongyu was about to close the system, he casually glanced at the gold price display, and his pupils suddenly constricted. The price had previously been showing 330 yuan per gram, but after he sold this batch of gold, it had plummeted to 260 yuan per gram. A 70 yuan drop in the price was a significant event. Based on the weight of the gold Zhao Hongyu had just sold, that 70 yuan was equivalent to 1 million yuan. Was this directly related to my selling of this batch of gold? Although Zhao Hongyu had some suspicions, he wasn't entirely sure. Excuse me, is this 70 yuan drop in the gold price directly related to the gold I just sold? Since he didn't understand, he had to ask the system. This was directly related to Zhao Hongyu's development, and he had to get a clear answer. Of course, if the system refused to answer due to insufficient authority, he would be left with nothing. When Zhao Hongyu asked this question using his consciousness, the system quickly responded. The user had sufficient authority to respond. After a series of beeps, a dialog box appeared. It must be said that after the protection period expired, the space-time trader system couldn't communicate in a cold, rigid tone, which was quite troublesome. Yes, commodity prices do drop as users import large quantities of goods, but they will gradually rise over time. Don't worry too much, users. Keep going, young man. Seeing this, Zhao Hongyu's heart fluttered. So there's a possibility of this happening. Large-scale dumping of goods can cause previously high prices to fall. Zhao Hongyu muttered to himself. Isn't this just like the real world? This is making people increasingly curious about you. Zhao Hongyu, having learned from his previous experience of being at a disadvantage, quickly adjusted his mindset this time. Now, Zhao Hongyu has firmly established his convictions and goals, saving money to improve the group's strength. As for any setbacks and difficulties, he simply laughs them off. Nothing in the world is smooth sailing, but as long as there's no threat to his personal safety, there's nothing to worry about. As long as Zhao Hongyu is still alive, he has a chance to grow stronger. Zhao Hongyu collected his thoughts and narrowed his eyes slightly. He must be more careful about this in the future. He must not engage in excessive commodity trade. Especially single-item trade is unwise. If he engages in large-scale transactions, causing prices to fall and then not rise for a short period of time, or even for an extended period, this will significantly limit his development. Therefore, he must conduct trade in an orderly manner and have a plan. Zhao Hongyu asked a few more questions, but this time the system didn't respond at all, shutting him up with the excuse that he lacked authority. Since he couldn't ask any more questions, Zhao Hongyu could only ponder this question as he exited the space-time trader. Of course, he hadn't shut down the trader, as he was about to begin cultivating genetic humans. The money in his account was useless now, he needed to spend it to strengthen his own power group. I'll tell you something, Zhao Hongyu said. His consciousness temporarily withdrawn from the trader and no longer connected to it. He glanced through the three-dimensional hologram at Wang Shan and Zhang Tidao sitting on either side. If we sell a large quantity of goods, the current price will drop, and it's likely that it won't recover for a while. It's a bit like the system setting up another barrier to prevent us from overexploiting resources or dumping them. After a pause, Zhao Hongyu thought for a moment and continued, I have reason to suspect that our large-scale purchases of products from the trader will cause their prices to destabilize and rise. After two such encounters with a trader without a protection period, Zhao Hongyu slowly learned to apply his insights to other situations. As Zhao Hongyu was speaking to Wang Shan and Zhang Tai, his thoughts raced. He saw some unfavorable factors in this. Not only Zhao Hongyu, but also Zhang Tai, a guy who was very interested in business, reacted immediately after listening to Zhao Hongyu's story. Chief, if we don't invest in a copycat research institute to research new products, doesn't it mean that it is very likely that the prices of our products will slowly increase? In the end, we will have no profit at all, and we may even lose money. It must be said that Zhang Tai is very talented in business, and it's no wonder that he is so interested in doing business. Zhao Hongai just finished talking about the situation he encountered, and he saw the drawbacks here. P.S. I would like to introduce a cool article by a good friend, and friends who are short of books can take a look. I also ask all readers to help my friend stabilize his godhood book 2,285,369, booked him holding the heavenly tribulation to help him ascend to the throne of godhood. Chapter 45 Song Hu's Little Thoughts. Thanks to July Blood Immortal, Passing, Solo Dance, Xiaofei Shuangjian, Leader Number 3, Unicorn Sea Cucumber Bread Cat, Zhu Xian fans, Decadent Shuang, I Am Brother Lal, and many other book lovers who have contributed to this little flop. I'd also like to thank Hong Tang Wei Yi, Wu Wang Ji Yui, Sister Zhao Bing Bing Lang, Cotton Bag, Mo Sampang, Ru Hu Taichi, Wolf Warrior, Cosmic Wolf Hunter, Mo Shangbor, Young Master Qing Shan, and many others for their reviews and corrections. It's with the support of enthusiastic readers that I can continue to improve. Thank you so much. A special thank you to Passing, Solo Dance, a reader of my previous book, is so grateful. Based on Zhao Hongaiu's description, Zhang Tai could predict it. The prices of the items they sell will drop, and conversely, the prices of the items Zhao Hongaiu purchases from the space-time trader will also increase as they buy more. An axe that originally cost 30 yuan might become 31, 32, and then rise to even higher prices. If this continues, they might not make any money in the future, or even lose money. These are all very likely problems. Looking at Zhang Tai, whose expression shifted from gloomy to bright, Zhao Hongaiu chuckled. Zhang Tai, don't worry too much. While your suspicions are possible, they're not impossible to prevent. Seeing Zhang Tai's eyes darting around, Zhao Hongaiu immediately understood what the boy was worried about, so he spoke to him. Don't forget, although these prices fluctuate, they also fluctuate based on our purchase and sales volume. As long as we don't trade too frequently, these prices will gradually stabilize, so don't worry. Phew. Hearing Zhao Hongaiu's words, Zhang Tai breathed a sigh of relief. It seems I was wrong. I thought the price would only go down or up, but it turns out it's slowly leveling off over time. I'm much more relieved now, knowing the situation he was worried about could still be brought under control. Zhang Tai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Alright, don't worry about that for now. I'm going to start breeding new genetic humans. Let's return to Manhattan Island immediately so we don't arouse the Mohicans' suspicions. If this breeding is successful, Zhao Hongai must return to Manhattan Island to avoid arousing the Mohicans' suspicions by suddenly having additional subordinates. You see, he had initially tricked the Mohicans into believing his tribe would come to him from the sea. Furthermore, all the goods he currently sells and trades in the Mohicans are transported to him by his tribe from the sea. Therefore, he could easily claim that new members of his tribe have arrived on Manhattan Island to join them. Wang Shen and Zhang Tai nodded in agreement. Zhao Hongaiu stood up, led the two of them through the curtain, and walked outside the tent. Zhang Tai, you'll be responsible for keeping an eye on the merchandise here, so you don't have to come with us to Manhattan. Since the commissary inside the Mohican camp needed to be manned, Zhang Tai and his men had to stay. Zhang Tai had no objection to this decision. He was actually eager to stay. He felt that trading with the Mohicans brought him immense satisfaction. By the way, Chief, Song Hu hasn't returned yet, and it's already evening. If he does, should I have him and his men go to Manhattan Island to find you? Seeing Zhao Hongaiu finish his instructions and leave, Zhang Tai suddenly remembered that Song Hu hadn't returned yet, so he inquired. Hearing this, Zhao Hongaiu and Wang Shan, who had already turned to leave, stopped in their tracks. Zhao Hongaiu looked up at the sky. The sun had already set, and darkness enveloped the east coast of North America. From afar, the howling of wolves echoed intermittently, echoing the chirping of insects. Well, just inform him to go to Manhattan Island when the time comes. And remind him not to be too harsh on little Emma's training. She's still a child. After all, Zhao Hongai was still very confident in Song Hu. He wasn't worried about anything happening to him. After all, with Song Hu's skills, some wild beasts couldn't pose any threat to him. And with little Emma by his side, her safety wouldn't be a problem. With that said, Zhao Hongaiu turned around, raised his right hand, and waved, leading Wang Shan towards the beach. Zhang Tai greeted his 4 geneticists and walked into the comfort store. Emma, remember this. The human body only has a few vital points. I don't need you to have superb skills. All I ask is that you be quick, ruthless, and accurate. It's that simple. As night fell, Song-Hu and Emma had already walked out of the forest and were at the edge. Little Emma continued to follow Song-Hu with an indifferent expression. She tilted her head, her large eyes twinkling as she looked at her teacher, listening attentively to his instructions. 1 strike kills. Once you learn these skills, you'll at least be able to protect yourself in this age of cold weapons. Don't think that just because you're a girl you're inferior to boys. That's a completely wrong idea, and it's best to get rid of it. Song-Hu was completely devoted to his little apprentice, Emma. Although she had her share of shortcomings, at least she satisfied Song-Hu's vanity. This was a teacher, and a martial arts teacher at that. In this day and age, it was truly rare for someone to still admire him. Even in the 21st century, his skills wouldn't even be considered impressive. There were countless people more powerful than him. Song-Hu was nothing. Note, the 21st century Song-Hu considered was the 21st century created by the genetically engineered humans within the space-time exchange, a world distinct from the one Zhao Hongyu encountered before his time travel. When he was a conscript in the army, he wasn't even considered a top soldier. It would have been wonderful if the adult Mohawk warriors had admired him, but now, there was only one underage girl. It was truly unpleasant to have him be treated like an idol. Despite his frustrations, Song-Hu remained devoted to teaching Emma, keeping nothing to himself. He imparted all his combat knowledge to Emma. This was actually a minor tactic Song-Hu employed. He figured that if he could teach Emma well and make her powerful, then, with a model to guide her, he would surely attract even more Mohawks to his fold. Haha. Song-Hu felt a small sense of pride in his heart. His dreams were completely different from those of Wang Shen and Zhang Tai. His dream was to become an instructor who could train many exceptional fighters. He remembered the instructors who had taught him as truly impressive. Whenever Song-Hu imagined the imaginary scene of the soldiers he trained with standing at attention, saluting, and shouting "Hello, instructor," upon seeing him, his lips would curl slightly. Wang Shan's biggest dream was to be a loyal servant, dedicated to Zhao Hongyu. And Zhang Tai's dream was to be a successful businessman. The 3 genetic humans bred within the space-time trading machine. While their backgrounds varied, all children from remote mountainous areas, each shared a dream. This was understandable, as their personalities were completely different. Unlike the genetic humans bred later, they possessed their own unique personalities. Compared to them, the 12 genetic humans bred later seemed completely dull, rigid, and mechanical. Sifu, Song-Hu lowered his head and tilted his head to look at Emma. "What's the matter, Emma?" "Sifu, how come you know so much?" Little Emma was puzzled. Why did these tribesmen brought by Black Eyes know so little? Her father's Mohawk tribe also had many brave warriors, but compared to this Sifu, they seemed like fools. Over the past few days, Emma had learned a great deal from Song-Hu. For example, where a knife cut would cause the most pain and disable a person. With bare hands, the right spot to strike to dislocate joints or even break them, and even the correct amount of force. This kind of knowledge was simply unprecedented, and little Emma felt like she had entered a completely different world. She remembered watching her father instruct the Mohawk warriors as a child. He simply taught them that with courage, they could defeat their enemies. Little Emma and the other children had also secretly observed the Mohawks' wars against neighboring tribes. They charged forward in a chaotic frenzy, completely devoid of any order. This was completely different from what the Silk House had taught them. She felt that the Mohawk warriors, led by her father, were simply weak. If possible, Emma would have even asked the Silk House to teach all the Mohawk warriors the tactics and teamwork he had taught them. However, Emma knew that this was wishful thinking. She was still a child and had no say in the tribe. Furthermore, the elders wouldn't listen to a child, especially a girl. "It's not that I know a lot, but that our tribe possesses this knowledge," Song-Hu replied with a smile. Of course, he wouldn't tell Emma the truth. Would he tell the little one that his knowledge was simply out of date? That was clearly impossible. "Wow, Brother Haitong's tribe is so powerful." Emma's icy expression finally softened. Song-Hu chuckled inwardly, but his expression remained grave. He nodded. "Don't overthink it, little one. Think about how to master what I'm teaching you. As long as you learn it, you'll at least be able to protect yourself." Song-Hu clearly didn't want to say anything more on the subject. Little Emma noticed this and let out a somewhat unwilling "Oh, HMPH, I'll ask Brother Haitong when I get a chance. He'll always tell me." Chapter 46 Women hold up half the sky. After returning to the Mohawk camp, Song-Hu parted ways with little Emma. Watching little Emma's retreating figure, Song-Hu's eyes flickered. If all the Mohawks learn martial arts from me and become my disciples, it would be of great benefit to the leader in the future. Perhaps I should find a way to make a name for myself, as one of the 3 most intelligent geneticists around Zhao Hongyu. Song-Hu's intelligence wasn't in vain. Especially with his loyalty, he would always consider Zhao Hongyu's interests. After all, Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song-Hu, the 3 of them, have a loyalty of 120. This is 20 points higher than the average. After all, a normal geneticist with a loyalty of 90 points is essentially insurmountable. Let alone these 3, with a loyalty of 120 points. Therefore, their loyalty to Zhao Hongyu was incredibly high. Of course, in addition to these 3, the loyalty of the 12 geneticists bred in the second round also reached 120 points. However, these geneticists weren't very smart, so they couldn't possibly consider what would benefit Zhao Hongyu like Wang Shan, Zhang Tai, and Song-Hu did. Well, if it really doesn't work out, I'll teach Emma for a few days. Then I'll organize a fighting tournament within the Michigan tribe. If Emma makes a splash, perhaps my plan will have a good chance of success. Emma's small figure spun and disappeared not far away. Song-Hu also withdrew his gaze and turned to walk towards the commissary. When he reached a commissary within the Michigan tribe, the dull geneticist guarding the door noticed him and notified Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai, notified, hurried out of the tent. Just then, Song-Hu arrived at the door, and Zhang Tai spoke to him. The chief and Wang Shan have gone to Manhattan Island. Tonight, the chief will resume genetically engineered humans. I'll see to it that there won't be any problems here. I'll continue my trade with the Mohicans tomorrow. Take your men to Manhattan Island. Zhang Tai relayed Zhao Hongyu's last words to Song-Hu. Song-Hu pondered for a moment and nodded. Okay, I'll go now. To save the chief from worrying about waiting too long, I'll leave everything here in your hands. Song-Hu lifted his leg and headed for the seashore, where his men were guarding the canoe. Although it was a bit of a hassle, they still had to cross the sea to the Mohican tribe the next day to teach Emma fighting techniques. But Song-Hu didn't want Zhao Hongyu to worry about him, so he just made a little extra travel. After seeing Song-Hu off, Zhang Tai and his men returned to the tent and began to prepare dinner. After a day of bustling activity, the Mohawk camp gradually quieted down with puffs of smoke rising from the air. By this time, the Mohawk men who had been out hunting had returned to camp, and the women had waited for their men to return safely. Everyone was enjoying a rare moment of warmth. Little Emma had also returned home. She lifted the tent curtain and found her mother sitting inside, her face beaming with joy. "Mom, why are you so happy today? Is there something good?" Emma asked curiously, seeing her mother's joyful face. Seeing her daughter enter, Black Bear's wife, Paula, smiled even more brightly. "Emma, you're back. Look, I bought a lot of pickled mustard greens and rice today," Paula said, pointing to the rice and pickled mustard greens, along with her guotao and other goods piled in a corner. Emma glanced at them, her expression unchanged. Paula wasn't surprised by her daughter's reaction. Ever since that incident, her daughter's personality had changed significantly, and she was less likely to smile. Whenever she thought about this, Paula's heart ached. The kind-hearted Mohawk woman blamed herself deeply. She believed it was her own carelessness that had led to her beloved daughter being captured by those hateful white people and suffering such harm. So, when the black bear attacked her, she endured it silently. With a look of pity on her face, Paula gestured for Emma to come over and sit in her arms. In the past, Paula's gesture would have immediately prompted little Emma to rush over and play with her. Unfortunately, this time, it was no use. Little Emma simply sat down beside her mother without much reaction. Sighing, Paula didn't blame her daughter. "Are you hungry? I've cooked a pot of rice and sautéed some bison, using the techniques I learned in cooking class. Why don't you eat some now? Don't wait for your father to return." Emma was still young, at the age when she could thrive and thrive. It was so late, and Paula suspected her daughter might be hungry. Emma shook her head. "Let's wait for father to come back and eat together." "I'm not that hungry yet," he rejected his mother's suggestion. A burning torch was slanted onto the wooden pillar in the center of the tent. In an age without oil lamps or lighting, this was the Mohican way of finding light at night. Zhao Hongyu complained bitterly about this, as it posed a significant risk. However, there was nothing he could do about it. He couldn't let them grope in the dark, so, after a few complaints, Zhao Hongyu stopped talking about the issue. Crackling. The crackling sound of wood from the burning torch echoed from time to time within the tent. Emma, is there something on your mind? If so, tell me. Perhaps I can give you an answer. Paula looked at her daughter with a cold expression, her heart aching. She was not at all happy to see Emma like this. She knew that her daughter had been following a warrior from the foreign tribe named Song Hu, learning some fighting techniques from him. Originally, Paula thought it was pointless for a girl to learn these skills. She should learn how to cook, sew leather clothing, and debone game. These were the skills a Mohawk woman should possess. However, seeing her daughter's melancholy, Paula, wanting to cheer her up, didn't stop her from studying with Song Hu. After Emma spent a few days with Song Hu, Paula noticed that she seemed troubled upon returning home. This unusual behavior worried Paula, a mother. She wondered what had happened to her daughter that had caused her to become so troubled. Today, she finally couldn't help herself and asked. Paula didn't want her daughter to hide anything from the mother who had given birth and raised her. Of course, the main reason was Paula's concern for Emma. Mother, are you saying that women in this world can't hunt and fight like men? Just as Paula was feeling uneasy, fearing her child would ignore her, little Emma asked in a low, expressionless voice. Emma's eyes dropped, her body fixed motionless as she stared at the ground in the dim firelight. Why do you ask? Paula was puzzled, unable to understand her daughter's question. In Paula's mind, women had always been subordinate to men. Hunting and fighting had always been men's business, and all a woman had to do was take care of the household and wait patiently for the men to return home. The women of the Mohican tribe had lived this way for generations, and there was nothing wrong with it. My silk house told me that women hold up half the sky in this world. Men need women, and women can do many things men can't. Even things men can do, women can do some of them, Emma said to her mother, Paula, in a gentle voice. Although I don't quite understand it, I believe that if men can fight, then women can do it too. At this point, Emma's lowered face lit up, and her gaze at the ground blossomed with a strange light. Before Paula could say anything, little Emma continued, it's true that we women can't match men's strength, but we can still learn fighting techniques to compensate for our innate shortcomings. Even if we can't single-handedly defeat 7 or 8 brave warriors like our father, we can still defeat 2 or 3. As she recounted this to her mother, Paula, little Emma recalled Song Hu's words to her. Women hold up half the sky. Never underestimate yourself and always have confidence in yourself. While innate weaknesses can't be overcome through nurture, fighting skills can more or less compensate for them. At first, Emma was skeptical. But over the past few days, Song Hu's words about Sifu made more and more sense. Although Emma didn't understand why Song Hu had called her Sifu, little Emma still followed his instructions. Song Hu also told her something about a teacher being a father for life, something little Emma couldn't quite grasp. Little Emma only knew a little bit. Only by following Song Hu's instructions could she learn his superb fighting techniques and become stronger. Unfortunately, Song Hu's skills were far from impressive. While training in the space-time trader, he'd only learned the basics in the virtual army. He couldn't even compare to the unsuccessful contestants in the Soldier King elimination tournament, so he could only bluff the Mohicans and little Emma. Did you know, I killed a coyote today all by myself? Paula hesitated as she looked up at her mother with a gleaming gaze, then revealed something shocking. What? You killed a coyote all by yourself? Chapter 47 Changes begin gradually. What? You killed a coyote all by yourself? Emma's mother, Paula, shuddered at her daughter's words, staring at little Emma with disbelief. As if uneasy under her mother's gaze, Emma shifted awkwardly. A faint blush crept across her cheeks, almost as if she were embarrassed. In reality, Emma knew only she felt a little ashamed. It's my fault for not explaining clearly. Actually, my coyote was beaten half to death by the silk house. And then I took its life. Finally, Emma let out the key message. Wow. That scared me to death. I knew it. How could a little girl like you kill a coyote all by yourself? Paula glared at Emma, her right hand gently tapping her chest. This is to build up my courage. It's scary if you haven't killed a coyote before. But once you've had that experience, it won't be so hard to accept. Emma's icy demeanor returned. After I killed the coyote, I felt like killing people wasn't such a big deal. Maybe it just felt the same as killing a coyote, so I figured if men could do it, We women could do it, too, Emma turned and said in a strange tone. Women should just wait for their husbands to come home. I don't know where you learned all these bad thoughts from at such a young age. As Emma finished her words, the buffalo hide curtain was lifted, and the head of the family, Black Bear, walked in. Emma, father's home. Let's eat quickly. I'm sure you're starving. Seeing Black Bear return, Emma's mother, Paula, opened the wooden lid of the rice simmering inside, took out the wooden bowls and plates sold by Zhao Hongyu and his men, and began to serve the rice and dishes on the floor. Black Bear walked to one side of the tent and hung his bow and arrows and weapons on the wall. Then he slowly walked over and sat between Emma and his wife. You're not a child anymore. Stop dwelling on these nonsense. Black Bear sat down and gently patted the scolded girl on the head. Emma remained silent. Black Bear withdrew his gaze. He couldn't do anything about his daughter's quietness. As a father, he could only accept it. What a rich dinner today, Black Bear sniffed, then looked at the meal laid out on the ground before the three of them, looking at his wife, Paula, with some surprise. Today, Haitong and the others started trading, and I followed your advice and went panning for stones. I've been lucky these days and found quite a few of those stones, so I traded them all for rice and your favorite guotao and pickled mustard greens, Paula replied with a smile. I can't believe it. Now we can have food to eat without having to go hunting, Black Bear sighed. Yes, there's nothing wrong with this. In the past, when we went hunting, there were always people injured by prey, or conflicts with hunting teams from neighboring tribes, so we women were always worried about you men. Paula filled a wooden bowl with rice and placed it in front of Black Bear. Every time you went out, we worried you wouldn't come back at night. Now, we don't have to worry anymore. Seeing the joy on his wife Paula's face, Black Bear felt something was amiss, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Besides, his wife Paula was right. Now they could trade for food without risking the dangers of hunting, so what was wrong? As for Black Bear, he only needed to lead the Mohawk warriors to guard the mine and ensure the women's safety. It wasn't difficult at all, in fact, it was easy. They would receive a small portion of the gold the women mined as their reward. How much did you get? Black Bear asked, somewhat puzzled. Paula helped Emma fill a bowl of rice. Then, looking up at Black Bear, she pointed to the rice and other items in the corner and said, look, a bag of rice is enough for us to eat for 15 sunsets. And there's also that guotao and pickled mustard greens you love. Paula had only spent 3 days panning for these things. And what she'd gained would be enough to feed them for half a month. This was something Paula had never imagined. It was foreseeable that she could complete this panning for stones before winter arrived. If she worked harder, she wouldn't have to worry about food for the entire winter. Furthermore, this food, called rice, could be stored for a long time as long as it wasn't damp. This was one of the reasons it was so popular among the Mohican women. What could be more satisfying than having food that could be stored for a long time? In previous years, although Black Bear had hunted plenty of prey, he couldn't stand the thought of constantly eating meat. But they had no choice because without meat, they had no other options. And in the summer, meat was very difficult to preserve. The Mohicans didn't know how to air dry meat, so it would quickly rot and be discarded. This was extremely wasteful. It seems I was right to trust Haitong and ask you to go panning for gold, Black Bear muttered to himself, looking at his wife's delighted face. Listening to his husband's grumbling, Paula said, of course. Don't you know the looks those women who didn't believe anything looked at us today when we brought all this food back? They deserved it. It's their fault for not trusting you and Haitong. After happily filling Emma and Black Bear's bowls with rice, Paula filled a bowl for himself. Our lives will get better and better. Haitong said his tribe will send some merchandise soon. Then we'll have even more to trade. Black Bear's mood brightened, touched by his wife's joy. By the way, I have some rocks here too. Collect them first. Once you've accumulated a sufficient amount, you can trade them for more guotao. Black Bear untied a small leather bag made of marmot skin from his waist and handed it to his wife, Paula. Paula took the bag, unzipped it, and looked inside, revealing a large amount of scattered gold grains. This is the daily protection fee. It's useless anyway, so I might as well give it to you to save. Black Bear then ignored Paula and began to eat, alternating between rice and pickled mustard greens from his bowl. Paula happily put the bag away and began to urge Emma to eat. Scenes like Black Bear's were repeated in many Mohawk families. Many felt something was amiss, but no one could truly grasp what it was. Little did they know that their lifestyles were slowly being altered. Ultimately, Their long-held habits would be completely upended by Zhao Hongyu and his men. Some Mohawk women, previously without status in their families, had no regard for their jobs when they went to the gold mines. However, after returning home with a large pile of food, they noticed a change in how their families looked at them. Their mothers-in-law, who used to be critical, now smiled widely. Their husbands, who had always been stern, seemed to be warmer to them. Especially after drinking the erguotao they brought home, the men actually flirted with them. These uneducated Mohawk women were somewhat bewildered by this change. However, some of the more astute women realized that the change must be related to their work in the gold mines and the fact that it provided food for their families. The more these wise women thought about it, the more it made sense. They secretly decided that they couldn't give up this job, because the change in their status was so significant. Some women, who had previously been bullied or beaten at home, felt the benefits of work for the first time. "If you don't hit me from now on, I'll bring you a bottle of erguotao every day." A timid woman, seeing her husband in a good mood, tentatively made a deal. This woman had no ambition, she simply wanted to avoid domestic violence. "No problem, the family's food will depend on you from now on," the man readily agreed. He didn't have to work, and there was food to eat. What could he be unhappy about? Parasites exist in every era, and the Moxigan tribe is no exception. "From now on, when I'm not home and you're not hunting, you'll be the one to take care of the children," a woman, already somewhat of a feminist, returned home and said this to her husband. "No problem at all," the man smiled and agreed, happily drinking the erguotao his wife had brought him. Various conversations and bargains were taking place in over 100 households within the Moxigan tribe. The Moxigan tribe was being subtly transformed, yet the Moxigan people hadn't yet noticed. No one could predict what the future would hold. And no one could have known that the first to change within the Mohican tribe were the women, who had always been content. The other women who had witnessed the women returning from the gold mine with their gold panning, besides secretly regretting not believing Black Bear and lamenting their missed opportunity, decided to go find Black Bear the next day and ask him if the mine needed anyone else. After all, not only the women witnessed the scene today, but many men as well. Just picking up a few rocks could earn you so much food, who wouldn't want to do such a good thing? The Mohicans also have a penchant for taking advantage. That night, some women's status in the family rose, while others were scolded and beaten by the men. "We asked you to go, but you said Black Bear and Black Eyes wouldn't believe it. Now go and see. The wife of the XX family, who used to be worse off than us, has actually brought back so much food." Chapter 48 Raising a girl is more expensive. Zhao Hongyu certainly hadn't anticipated the events that unfolded that night within the Mohican camp. Even if he knew, he'd probably have simply laughed it off, not taken it too seriously. While these changes within the Mohican tribe were only just beginning, no one knew what they would ultimately lead to. Zhao Hongyu and Wang Shan had already reached Manhattan Island and arrived at their yurt. This was their only true home. Living among the Mohicans was strangely unpleasant. Inside the tent, Zhao Hongyu sat in a corner covered in thick furs and spoke to Wang Shan, who was lighting a fire. Winter has just passed, and although spring has arrived, the nights are still very cold. Night temperatures typically drop to -2-3 degrees Celsius, which is quite chilly. Especially in those days, without heating, it was a very harsh season. Furthermore, it had rained a few days earlier, making the damp air even more unbearable. However, Zhao Hongyu and his companions were unconcerned. A fire could be built inside the yurt. They gathered plenty of firewood and stacked it together, completely escaping the damp and biting cold. Unlike the Mohican tents, the yurt had a circular notch in the top, allowing air to circulate naturally, eliminating the risk of toxic fumes filling the tent. The Mohican tents were a bit inferior, as they could also be built with fires. However, once a fire was lit, black smoke billowed throughout the tent, choking the entire space. It was precisely for this reason that Zhao Hongyu's yurt attracted so many middle and upper-class Mohicans. Who wouldn't want a better life? Even primitive Indians yearned for a better life. It was human nature. The remaining geneticists kept the fire burning until Zhao Hongyu and his companions returned. Wang Shan crouched on the ground, took out a hollowed-out wooden pole, and blew a few times at the base of the fire. With a roar, flames erupted. Watching the flames leap, Wang Shan quickly added a few handfuls of firewood, instantly raising the temperature inside the tent. The humid air inside began to dry out. Zhao Hongyu had erected over a dozen yurts at the southern tip of Manhattan Island, near the sea. However, only 2 or 3 of these were being used, the majority remained empty. "Chief, I'm going to prepare dinner. I'll call you back when it's ready." After lighting the fire, Wang Shan turned and left, leaving Zhao Honggai alone inside. After Wang Shan left, Zhao Honggai shifted his position and sat closer to the fire. The floor inside the tent was covered with thick animal fur, leaving only a small open space in the center for the fire. The firelight illuminated Zhao Honggai's face, and the scar on his cheek seemed to come alive as the flames danced. Zhao Honggai touched his scar, speechless. He didn't know if it would ever heal. If it didn't, he'd probably have to bear it for the rest of his life, he sighed inwardly. Lowering his hand, Zhao Honggai rubbed the ruby ring on his left middle finger. "I now have over 6 million in cash, more than enough to start breeding genetically modified humans. The one-time breeding model I used last time probably won't work anymore. Otherwise, if we encounter some unfortunate natural or man-made disaster, all our efforts will be wasted." Thinking of this, Zhao Honggai closed his eyes and pondered quietly. After about half an hour, Zhao Honggai made a decision. Since using a preset template would be a hindrance, he might as well just breed the genetically modified humans one by one. This way, at least the success rate would be higher, and the cost wouldn't be too great. However, this would be a bit more troublesome. Moreover, breeding genetically modified humans would require more energy. After all, if Zhao Honggai abandoned the preset template, he would be facing the end. However, given Zhao Honggai's current situation, this was the only solution. He didn't want to be tricked into becoming an American sheep again, like last time. Activate. Zhao Honggai made up his mind, and without further ado, he opened the space-time trader. As his consciousness connected with the space-time trader, the ruby ring emitted rays of light, forming a three-dimensional holographic screen in front of him. Beep. Several options appeared, including Zhao Honggai's personal attributes. Zhao Honggai was already well versed in his personal attributes, so he only glanced at them briefly before focusing on the genetic human cultivation option. Zhao Honggai then activated the genetic human cultivation function. As the function was activated, an animated image, a blend of Picasso style and Chinese ink painting styles, slowly unfolded before Zhao Honggai's eyes. Cancel template. Zhao Honggai canceled the previous template, and a new option window immediately appeared. Please select the genetic human lineage, Asian or European. Zhao Honggai chose the Huaxia lineage without hesitation. After making his selection, a dialog box appeared again. For Asian lineage individuals, please choose Huaxia lineage, select region, Dongying lineage, select region, Gorilla lineage, select region. Zhao Honggai didn't hesitate and immediately selected the Huaxia lineage to confirm the cultivation, but didn't select the region. Zhao Honggai knew that if he didn't select a region, the time-space trader's genealogy cultivation function wouldn't be activated in regional mode. This would prevent the genealogy individuals from being divided into smaller groups based on their region, which would be very troublesome. To avoid this minor inconvenience, Zhao Honggai didn't select a region at all. This way, the system would instill a unified understanding of everyone as Huaxia when cultivating the genealogy individuals, eliminating any notions of regional distinctions. After selecting the genealogy individual's lineage, the dialog box appeared again. Please select the genealogy individual's origin, city, county, mountain village. Zhao Honggai was very familiar with this option, and he immediately chose mountain village. Beep, beep, beep. The dialog boxes continued to pop up, and Zhao Honggai was faced with another difficult selection process. Mountain village, surroundings of the city, subordinates to the county, remote areas. Zhao Honggai was already aware of this option. Remote mountain area. After making his choice, the animation, a Picasso-style blend of Chinese ink painting styles, trembled. It was no different from the creation of Wang Shan. A voiceover and narration described the acquaintance and friendship between a man and a woman. Zhao Honggai quietly watched the man and woman in the animation, waiting for the dialog box to appear and then selecting the appropriate option. If nothing unexpected happened, then, just like Wang Shan's parents, the man and woman in the animation would unite, give birth to a child, and eventually become Zhao Honggai's subordinate. This was the theoretical scenario. However, after Zhao Honggai's previous experience with his father, he would never believe it again. Who knew what kind of system trouble would cause him to lose his money? Beware of big mistakes. With this in mind, Zhao Honggai began a new journey of genetic human cultivation. Everything went smoothly for the time being. After Zhao Hongyu helped pay for the girlfriend pickup scheme, the time came for the two to discuss marriage. The betrothal gifts and the construction costs were paid, and the new house and furniture were prepared. The man and woman finally became a couple. Zhao Hongyu felt relieved, because based on Wang Shan's experience in breeding, the child was imminent. The woman became pregnant, and Zhao Hongyu helped pay for the pregnancy and then the birth. In a flash, the child was finally born. In reality, only 10 minutes had passed. Zhao Hongyu remained calm as he stared at the three-dimensional holographic image before him, waiting for the dialog box to appear and carefully selecting the various options. With the birth of the child and the subsequent nutritional costs, Zhao Hongyu paid for them all without a single hesitation. However, Zhao Hongyu did experience a slight surprise. This time, the genetically engineered human was a girl. Yes, there were no specific rules for genetically engineered humans. The user could select a fixed gender. Therefore, girls could be bred, too. However, this control was not on Zhao Hongyu's side, but rather a random selection. This was perfectly fair. The only question that puzzled Zhao Hongyu was why all the genetic people he'd bred the last 2 times were boys. Unfortunately, the space-time trader didn't offer an answer. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu could only attribute it to the fact that all the genetic people he'd bred during his protection period were male. There was nothing wrong with girls. Wang Shan and his group needed wives, too. Plus, a mix of men and women made things more lively, and their group was indeed full of testosterone. He just didn't know what the girls the genetic people would look like. Perhaps, Wang Shan and his group wouldn't have to worry about finding wives. The children grew up, went to school, and Zhao Hongyu paid for their tuition. Elementary school, middle school, high school. Compared to Wang Shan and his group, the female genetic people's life seemed much smoother. At least this girl, Jinhu, hadn't dropped out of school. She was even in high school. Zhao Hongyu had originally thought that Jinhu would definitely go to college, too. Then, he'd have a college-educated person by his side. Unfortunately, hope is beautiful, but reality is harsh. After graduating from high school, Jinhu dropped out. The reason was simple: her family couldn't afford college. At 18, the girl was in her prime. And all those years, Zhao Hongyu had paid for Jinhu's special feminine products, showing his deep care. A beep. A dialog box popped up, asking Zhao Hongyu if he wanted to claim the gene bearer immediately. By this point, Zhao Hongyu had already paid over 500,000 yuan for this female gene bearer. Raising a girl was clearly more expensive than raising a boy. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49: The First Female Genetic Person. Excuse me, would you like to claim the gene human right now? Zhao Hongyu hesitated at the space-time trader's question. While it wasn't a male gene human, but a female one, it might not be very useful in combat. Regardless, the cultivation had been successful without any trouble. Therefore, Zhao Hongyu consciously selected the confirmation option and, after paying double the fee, the female gene human, Jinhu, appeared out of thin air before Zhao Hongyu. Jinhu, within the space-time trader, had a look reminiscent of a Picasso-inspired ink painting, a truly horrific sight. However, when Jinhu actually appeared before Zhao Hongyu, he discovered she was completely different. Fortunately, with Wang Shan and the others as examples, Zhao Hongyu wasn't too surprised. The female gene human, Jinhu, appeared out of thin air, sitting sideways on the thick fur-covered floor, her arms folded across her chest to obscure her natural beauty. Before Zhao Hongyu's eyes lay a sliver of delicate flesh, causing his breathing to grow heavier. The woman looked quite delicate and pretty, a delightfully attractive sight. Pink lips and slender eyebrows, that was Zhao Hongyu's first impression. Fortunately, Zhao Hongyu wasn't the type to lose his composure at the sight of a woman. He quickly regained his balance, then bought a set of military work gear from the space-time trader and tossed it over. We don't have much stock right now, and we don't have any women's clothing. You'll have to make do with what you have, Zhao Hongyu said to the female gene human in a friendly manner. Jinhu blushed, lowered her head, silently picked up the military work gear, turned around, and quickly put it on. Once dressed, Jin Hoo finally felt less shy. Since we've nurtured you and brought you into our group, you need to know that we don't keep useless people here. Sensing Jin Hoo's composure, Zhao Honggai looked at her seriously with a stern face. Indeed, his group wouldn't keep useless people, even if you're a woman. Of course, Zhao Honggai didn't expect women to fight, but at least you had to be useful, right? Jin Hoo murmured a small hum, then nodded, indicating she was fully aware of the situation. Zhao Honggai was very pleased with Jin Hoo's reaction. He continued, "You can do a lot. I know you just graduated from high school. Besides me, you have the highest education in our group." Thinking of Wang Shen and the others, who only had junior high school educations, Zhao Honggai was at a loss for words. If it weren't for the knowledge gained during their 3 years of military service, Wang Shen and the others would probably be nothing more than peasants. Seeing Zhao Honggai's question, Jin Hoo lowered her head and replied quietly, "When I was in school, I had to help with the farm work at home, so I know how to till the fields. Also, my ambition is to apply to normal university and become a teacher after graduation. I think I could teach children." Zhao Honggai listened to Jin Hoo's words and began to ponder. It seems Wang Shen and the others can also do farming, so Jin Hoo is not very useful. However, she said she could teach children, and being a teacher did have some appeal to Zhao Honggai. Although she only graduated from high school, her education was not very high. But in the era of 1620, she was a very impressive figure. If Jin Hoo opened a class specifically to teach the children of the Mohawk, and brainwash them at the same time, it would be a huge benefit to his team. Thinking of this, Zhao Honggai looked at Jin Hoo seriously and said, "Well, it seems you're still useful. I'm thinking of opening a preschool to teach those Mohawk children. Since you're aspiring to be a teacher, I think you're up to the task, eh, Mohawk?" Jin Hoo was visibly stunned. She didn't know what a Mohawk was. The system hadn't told her she'd been transported to the year 1620. Seeing Jin Hoo's bewilderment, Zhao Honggai offered a brief explanation. After hearing Zhao Honggai's explanation, Jin Hoo completely collapsed. Wow, 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 wow. How did I end up in the year 1620? I occasionally read online novels, but they're always BL novels. Looking at Jin Hoo's devastation, Zhao Honggai's face darkened. Women are troublesome. Wang Shan and the others hadn't reacted much to the discovery of their time in the year 1620. Instead, they were a bit excited. It seems that males have a higher tolerance for stress than women. However, Zhao Honggai had also discerned a hint from Zhao Hoo. The personalities of the genetic people bred within the space-time trading system were no different from those of ordinary people. Of course, those 12 dull-witted genetic people didn't count. After discussing this with Jin Hoo, Zhao Honggai had initially confirmed that this girl's intelligence was above average, roughly on par with Wang Shen and the others. However, this was different from the 12 dull-witted individuals, which puzzled Zhao Honggai. Logically, he was no longer in a protected period. Based on previous experience, Jin Hoo shouldn't possess such intelligence and thinking personality, right? Otherwise, how could those 12 dull-witted individuals, so incompetent they couldn't even produce a single word, exist? After much reflection, Zhao Honggai found this rather odd. Could it be that, by not using templates to breed genetic people in batches, the intelligence of these individuals would increase, rather than producing dull, rigid individuals? Suddenly, Zhao Honggai suddenly considered that this was likely the problem. Although this was just a fleeting, malicious guess, and Zhao Honggai had no idea if it was accurate, he felt a strong possibility that this was the case. Thinking of this, Zhao Honggai decided to test it again immediately. If successful, he would know a little secret. Don't let your imagination run wild. Just live your life here well. You're here, so make the best of it. You can't go back anyway. Zhao Honggai consoled Jin Hoo, who sobbed and choked up at him. Chief. Do those natives, do they eat people? Jin Hoo blinked her tear-swollen eyes and looked at Zhao Honggai hopefully, awaiting his response. Zhao Honggai was a bit amused. How did this even connect? It was true that the Indians were natives, but they wouldn't eat people, would they? I told you to stop imagining things. You're still a high school student. What did you learn in school? Zhao Honggai shook his head helplessly. The Indians aren't cannibals from the depths of the Amazon jungle. Don't worry about that. At least we've spent a long time with them, and they haven't shown any ill will toward us. Jin Hoo breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Zhao Honggai's words. It was as if she had to hear Zhao Hongayu's words to feel reassured. Humph, Wang Shan and the others didn't have so many worries. Women, it seems, are more troublesome than men. In truth, Zhao Hongyu didn't understand women at all. Women are extremely sensitive, unlike men who can be carefree. Wang Shan, Zhao Hongyu called out, and then the door curtain lifted and Wang Shan walked in. As soon as Wang Shan entered, he saw Jin Hu sitting across from him. Huh, it's a girl this time, Wang Shan muttered, his large eyes darting around as he stared at Jin Hu for a long moment. It wasn't until Jin Hu, already embarrassed, practically buried her head in her chest that Zhao Hongyu finally let up. You've never seen a woman before, you idiot? Look how scared that girl is, Zhao Hongyu scolded Wang Shan with a fake, fierce expression. It was clear Zhao Hongyu was being deliberate and not angry at all, so Wang Shan wasn't frightened at all. He. Wang Shan feigned a foolish air, stroking the back of his head and laughing. This girl is beautiful. I'm almost sick of seeing those Mohawk girls all day. We have different aesthetics. I still think Chinese girls are beautiful. Zhao Hongyu had learned his lesson from Wang Shan's shamelessness. Take this girl out. She's new here and she's not familiar with some things. Explain things to her so she's clear. She's going to be a teacher, teaching those Mohawk kids, so you have to tell her some taboos. Zhao Hongyu looked at Wang Shan and seemed to see a hint of something strange in his eyes as he looked at Jin Hu. Could it be that Wang Shan has taken a fancy to Jin Hu? Zhao Hongyu smiled secretly in his heart. However, he did not object to this at all. If Wang Shan and Jin Hu became a couple, it would not be a bad thing. Besides, Wang Shan and the others were indeed bachelors, and they had to find wives. Since they had to find wives sooner or later, if a genetically gifted girl could solve this problem, then what would be wrong with it? As Zhao Hongyu, he was very happy to see this happen. Her name is Jin Hu, and she is only 18 years old. As an older brother, you have to be nice to her. Besides, you are an old man in the group, so you have to take care of the newcomers. Zhao Hongyu said to Wang Shan with a sly smile. Wang Shan nodded repeatedly, his eyes never leaving Jin Hu. It was obvious that Wang Ba and Lu Dao were attracted to each other. It was a pity that Lu Dao did not know whether Wang Ba would like the show or not. Come on, girl, let's go to the yurt next door. That's my home. Let's not disturb the leader here, he has more important things to do. Wang Shan frivolously took Jin Hu's hand and led her out of Zhao Hongyu's tent. As they were about to leave, Jin Hu glanced back at Zhao Hongyu with some trepidation, and Zhao Hongyu nodded encouragingly. Wang Shan, the opportunity has been created for you. Whether you can pick up a girl is your own business. Zhao Hongyu smiled and continued his plan to cultivate genetic humans. Chapter 50, Chief, Buy Black Slaves. Jin Hu's training had cost Zhao Hongyu over 1,000,000 yuan, more than double what Wang Shan and the others had spent. Could this be the so-called raising boys poorly and girls well? Zhao Hongyu grumbled inwardly as he rubbed the ruby ring on his left middle finger again. He then communicated with his space-time trader with his mind and continued to train the new gene human. Jin Hu's successful training had reduced Zhao Hongyu's concerns about the probability of natural or man-made disasters. A 90% chance was indeed high, but it didn't seem so likely. Otherwise, how could Jin Hu have been so successful? Could it be that by training each child individually, the system would mostly avoid such natural or man-made disasters? Zhao Hongyu was puzzled. Perhaps, only if he invested heavily all at once would the system achieve a 90% chance? Thinking about it, Zhao Hongyu felt that this was most likely the reason. He could do it one by one, even though it would be troublesome and time-consuming. But he had no other choice. He couldn't afford to lose so much money right now. If he could stabilize his finances and make more money in the future, he could breed a large number of them. After choosing his birthplace, Zhao Hongyu began breeding a new gene human. Since he'd chosen a birthplace that was less expensive, Zhao Hongyu still had enough money to breed a few more. But with Jin Hu's example, Zhao Hongyu was worried that all the next ones would be girls. That would be a disaster. After all, a male gene human only cost a little over 400,000 yuan. With his money, he could breed about 10 with a little extra, and males were currently very useful. If females appeared, not only would the cost be more than double, but they weren't particularly useful right now, making it a very difficult process. But that didn't mean females were bad, they had their advantages. So, amidst this apprehension, Zhao Hongyu welcomed the birth of his second gene human. After a night of hard work, Zhao Hongyu successfully bred a total of 5. The genders were 2 girls and 3 boys, and because they were chosen one by one through a dialogue box, their intelligence was normal, unlike the 12 wooden lumps. It took an entire night to cultivate 5 geneticists. In other words, Zhao Hongyu toiled all night to increase his staff by 5 units. And that was with a small number of people. If he had more money in the future, wouldn't cultivating geneticists take even longer? Of course, Zhao Hongyu encountered some disappointing situations along the way. 3 of his attempts to cultivate geneticists failed, and the reasons for these failures were all bizarre. Reason 1. A male geneticist transferred to the provincial capital after junior high school. At the start of the semester, he was stabbed to death by a school bully who tried to rob him of his money. Reason 2. A male geneticist in college had a crush on a female student, causing his academic performance to decline. The female student was subsequently snatched away by a wealthy and handsome man, leading to a conflict between them, with tragic consequences. Reason 3. A male geneticist dropped out of high school to smuggle drugs for money. He was apprehended by our valiant police and sentenced to death. All of this was no different from real life. It was only when it appeared in the genetic human cultivation function within the space-time trader that it seemed both incongruous and eerie. But Zhao Hongyu had no choice but to accept this bizarre failure. His face was pale, and after a night of sleep, Zhao Hongyu yawned and leaned against a soft bearskin cushion. Have they all been arranged? Meanwhile, his lackey, Wang Shan, sat across from Zhao Hongyu, personally grilling bison for him. In the center of the tent, Wang Shan had set up several thick wooden racks. While he roasted the beef, he cooked thin rice porridge in an iron pot. Everything's arranged. 2 women in one group, 3 men in another. They need to study a bit before they can contact the Mohicans, and they also need to learn the Mohican language, Wang Shan replied as he turned the wooden racks holding the beef. Zhao Hongyu nodded. He had no objection to the arrangement. Chief, do you really plan to have those 2 women teach? Or are they going to teach the children of the Moxigan tribe? Wang Shan turned to Zhao Hongyu and asked. Wang Shan believed this would be a difficult undertaking. The Moxigan tribe was so primitive and backward, they didn't even have their own cultural heritage. How could they possibly be taught? Furthermore, the method and the type of knowledge to be taught were all factors that needed to be considered. Upon hearing this, Zhao Hongyu sat up straight, his eyes flickering for a moment before he replied, yes, they've shown up at the perfect time. I had this plan originally, but I just didn't have the right people. Now with Jinhu and the other 2, everything has become much easier. Zhao Hongyu then shared his plans with Wang Shan. Wang Shan, don't you understand? We can't pull the Mohican tribe onto our chariot simply by relying on shared interests. Only by instilling a certain ideology in them can we truly unite them. This isn't something that can be accomplished quickly, so I think betting on their children might yield greater rewards. Wang Shan fell silent, shaking the beef rack as he listened to Zhao Hongyu's story. And our population is bound to grow in the future, so what about the Mohicans? Zhao Hongyu raised his head slightly, gazing at the round vents on the tent ceiling, peering through the vents at the azure sky. Excluding them is unrealistic, so what we need to do is get them to accept us and assimilate, and integrating a race isn't easy, so unifying their ideology is the most effective means. Unfortunately, changing the mindsets of their adults is difficult, and success isn't guaranteed. But if we focus on their children, that's a different story. Listening to Zhao Hongyu's story, Wang Shan pondered it in his heart. He knew the leader's plan was sound. But wasn't it a little premature to consider these issues now? After all, the situation hasn't even begun yet. With the 5 new geneticists, they only have 20 people. Considering a large-scale integration now seems unrealistic. But don't forget, the Moxigan tribe has a population of over 10,000, many times theirs. Chief, isn't it a bit redundant to consider a large-scale integration now? We're still short on manpower. I think it's a bit premature to think about integrating the Moxigan tribe. Wang Shan's words were barely finished when Zhao Hongyu loudly retorted. You're wrong. It's not too early to consider this at all. You need to consider our income and analyze how many geneticists we can produce in a year, Zhao Hongyu said seriously, looking at Wang Shan from where he sat. Think about it. With our current income, how many geneticists can we produce in a year? Even taking into account the probability of geneticists failing, we won't be able to compete with what we have now. Wang Shan nodded silently as Zhao Hongyu spoke. And we're not just trading furs and gold, We'll soon begin trade with neighboring countries. First, you want to see if our income will grow exponentially. And we're not just selling goods. According to our previous plan, we want to change their lifestyles, to adopt a new way of life. We'll also teach them to use iron pots and cook their own dishes. All of this is closely related to our goods, and you have to understand. Most of what we sell are consumables. Once they run out, the Indians will get used to them and come back for more. At this point, Zhao Hongayu's face flushed an unusually bright red, and his eyes grew hazy. Imagine what your business would be like if nearly everyone in the entire county came to buy your goods, and you were the only one selling them. Wang Shan knew with a quick thought, such a business would be incredibly profitable. Even if they monopolized the entire county, it would still be a huge business. Moreover, as Zhao Hongyu mentioned, they were the only one trading in this county. With the money, we can continue to increase our manpower. A year may not seem like a long time, but I guarantee that by the end of the year our population will have increased by at least a dozen times. Zhao Hongyu excitedly stood up and began pacing the tent. And when our numbers grow, what do you think the Mohicans will do to us? And what about the children who have been brainwashed by our teachers? And what about when we tell them what benefits they will receive as members of our tribe? Wang Shan remained silent as he bombarded Wang Shan with questions. After a long moment, Zhao Hongyu finally calmed down. I was a little too excited. Many things can be discussed later. Only this brainwashing cannot. We must begin immediately, Zhao Hongyu said firmly. Wang Shan shrugged and said, you are the leader. Of course, you have the final say on this matter. Zhao Hongyu sat down again and took a few deep breaths. I'll take a nap this morning. This afternoon we'll go to Mohican to find old Chief Samara. We can persuade him to start trading with the surrounding tribes. Wang Shan blinked and said, I agree with this idea, but I have something to remind the chief. We can actually start developing Manhattan Island at the same time. Don't forget that if we're short on manpower, we can always go to the British and buy some black people. At this time, Wang Shan didn't know it, but it was this suggestion that brought the peak of the black people's blood and tears, which moved everyone who heard it to tears and saw it, to grief, by many years. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.